Story 1. Brother-in-law hid a creepy I love you note in a gift, and then my mother-in-law tried to get me to live with him while my husband was recovering from a car accident. Back in college, I went to the same university as my now husband, Calvin, and his older brother, Austin. Austin was a year ahead of us. The funny thing is, I actually met Calvin because of Austin. I had a small, harmless crush on Austin, like a lot of girls did. Austin had a reputation. Everyone knew him as the playboy type. He was good-looking, charming, and always surrounded by women. I knew about this reputation, and even though I thought he was attractive, I made a conscious decision to not become another one of his playthings. I valued myself more than that. Of course, my best friend at the time found out about my little crush, and as best friends do, she teased me about it constantly. It got to the point where pretty much all of our mutual friends knew. I'm pretty sure, though it was never said directly, that word got back to Austin himself. That's when things started to get complicated. Austin started flirting with me in group settings. He'd be overly friendly, always finding a way to sit next to me or touch my arm. He got my phone number from someone and started texting me. He'd send these complimentary messages saying I was girlfriend material and things like that. It was flattering, I won't lie, but I was also very skeptical. I kept reminding myself of his reputation. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was just playing a game. He also had this habit of saying, especially when he'd been drinking, that he wasn't ready for a serious relationship. He wanted to enjoy his carefree moments, he'd say. It was a huge red flag, and it reinforced my doubts about his sincerity. I was a pretty serious student. I spent a lot of time in the college library studying. It was kind of my safe space, but Austin started showing up there too. He'd always have some excuse, like needing help with an assignment or wanting to borrow a book. It was clear he was just trying to find ways to talk to me. It was persistent and honestly a little annoying because I wasn't giving him much encouragement. Then there were the notes. Twice, he wrote me these notes where he basically confessed that he had feelings for me. They were pretty intense, but here's the confusing part. When I confronted him about these notes face to face, he'd backpedal. He'd apologize and say he didn't mean to make me uncomfortable. It was this constant hot and cold behavior that I just couldn't understand. I didn't have a lot of experience with relationships back then, so I was genuinely confused. I didn't know what to make of him. The real kicker came on my birthday, which was about a week before New Year's. Austin sent me this really heartfelt message. He said he was in love with me and that he wanted to be in a serious relationship with me. It was a complete 180 from his usual behavior. I was stunned. I actually asked him directly if he was serious because I couldn't believe it. He said he was, and he even told me he planned to propose officially on New Year's Eve. We were all going to a mutual friend's party, so I guess he thought that would be the perfect time. So New Year's Eve arrived. I got to the party, and Austin was there with his brother, Calvin. This was the first time I'd ever met Calvin, and let me tell you, he was the complete opposite of Austin. Calvin was sweet, a little shy, and definitely not the center of attention type. We started talking and we just clicked. It was easy and natural. We had a genuine connection right from the start. It's hard to explain, but it felt like I'd known him for a long time. The strange thing was, Austin avoided me all night. It was the weirdest thing. He wouldn't even make eye contact after that big birthday message and his supposed plan to propose. I was expecting something, but he acted like I didn't exist. I was relieved to be honest, but also confused. I planned to talk to him at some point, just to make it clear that I wasn't interested anymore, but I never got the chance. Later in the evening, I went into the kitchen to get a drink, and I saw Austin. He was kissing another friend of ours. It was a real wake-up call. It confirmed everything I'd suspected about his sincerity. He saw me and he immediately looked guilty. He started apologizing, assuming I was upset. I asked him if we could talk privately. We went to a quieter room, and I just calmly told him that I thought it was best if we dated other people. I told him straight up that my crush was over. But Austin, he didn't take it well. He actually tried to blame me, saying I'd been leading him on. It was ridiculous. I stood my ground. I told him we were never in a committed relationship, and I had never explicitly told him I liked him. I ended the conversation by telling him he could think whatever he wanted, and I walked away. It felt good to finally close that chapter. The day after the party, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Calvin. He'd gotten my number from a mutual friend. That text message changed everything. He asked me out on a date and I said yes. Before things got serious, though, I felt like I needed to be completely honest with him. I told him the entire story about Austin. I didn't want any secrets between us. Calvin's reaction surprised me. He was incredibly understanding. He said it wasn't a big deal, that it was all in the past. His reaction was such a contrast to Austin's behavior. It showed me his maturity and his genuine kindness. Calvin and I started dating, and it was amazing. We fell in love. It was a real, deep connection. Nothing like the superficial crush I'd had on Austin. Calvin became my best friend. Everything to me. He was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. But the situation did not sit right with Austin. He was cold toward me whenever he would see me. Over the years, Austin consistently found ways to interfere with our relationship. He'd insert himself into our plans. For example, if Calvin and I had tickets to a concert, Austin would suddenly decide he had to see that band too, and he'd invite himself along. Or if we were having a quiet movie night at home, he'd show up wanting to play board games or do something else that involved everyone. It was like he couldn't stand for us to have any time alone, especially since at the time Calvin and Austin were living together. My resentment towards Austin started to grow. I talked to Calvin about it, telling him that Austin's behavior was weird. It was hard to ignore, and it wasn't like Austin was in a relationship himself. He continued his playboy lifestyle, sleeping with multiple women, so it wasn't like he was pining after me. Then there was the big brother talk. When Calvin and I started getting serious, having dinners with each other's families, Austin took Calvin aside. He told Calvin that he shouldn't get serious with me, that there were plenty of fish in the sea. He even tried to convince Calvin to sleep with other women. It was disgusting. Calvin told me about this conversation, and I was furious. It felt like a deliberate attempt to sabotage our relationship. But I trusted Calvin completely. I knew he would never do anything like that. After 2 years of dating, Calvin and I decided to move in together. It was a big step, and we were both excited. Austin, however, was not happy. He tried to convince Calvin to let him move in with us. It was incredibly awkward. I flat out refused. I knew it would be a disaster. Austin then started spreading rumors about me to our mutual friends. He said I was coming between him and Calvin, that I was controlling Calvin's life. Calvin shut that down quickly when he heard about it, but Austin's behavior just kept escalating. The worst incident happened at a bowling alley. We were out with a group of friends, and someone complimented me on my shirt. Austin, seemingly on purpose, spilled his drink all over me. Later, he apologized, but then he made this incredibly inappropriate comment, telling me I shouldn't wear revealing clothes around him. It was creepy. It made me so uncomfortable. I actually considered breaking up with Calvin at that point just to get away from Austin's constant interference and unsettling behavior. Calvin and I had a serious conversation about Austin. Calvin, for the first time, admitted that Austin's behavior was indeed odd. He'd been dismissing it for a long time, but he finally saw it for what it was. We decided to distance ourselves from Austin. Calvin would still see him one-on-one if he wanted to, but I stopped going to any group gatherings where Austin was present. It was a necessary step to protect my own well-being and our relationship. Of course, our friends noticed the change. Word got back to Austin, and then I received a long apology message from him. He said he was happy for me and Calvin, and that he would stop interfering. And surprisingly, he actually seemed to mean it. He stopped making me uncomfortable. We had a period of relative peace. Calvin and I got married. It was a beautiful day, a celebration of our love. But even at the wedding, there was a small red flag. Austin was Calvin's best man, and during his speech, he made a reference to his past crush on me. He framed it as a sacrifice he'd made for his brother. Everyone laughed, thinking it was a sweet gesture, but I was mortified. It felt like he was bringing up the past in a way that was inappropriate and unnecessary. Calvin didn't seem bothered by it though, so I decided to let it go. I didn't want to cause any drama on our wedding day. Austin turned 30, and his family started putting pressure on him to settle down. His parents kept urging him to find a serious partner, but he always laughed it off. Calvin confided in me that he found it genuinely strange that Austin had never been in a serious committed relationship. He said Austin was a good-looking guy, had a good job, and was generally a fun person to be around. Calvin tried to talk to Austin about it, but Austin just brushed him off. 2 years ago, Calvin threw me a small birthday party. Austin gave me a large, expensive-looking gift. He specifically told me to open it later, away from everyone else. That immediately felt suspicious. I agreed, and we moved on to other presents. Later that night, after the party, Calvin and I opened Austin's gift together. It was a heart-shaped box filled with chocolates, and in the center, there was a diamond necklace. Calvin was taken aback. He said it was a really inappropriate gift. Something you'd give to a romantic partner, not your brother's wife. He tried to rationalize it, saying maybe Austin was just clueless about gifts because he'd never been in a serious relationship, but I could see the concern in his eyes. I put the necklace away in a drawer, trying to forget about it. About a year later, I was cleaning out my drawers and found the necklace again. I was just fiddling with it, and I discovered that it opened. There was a hidden compartment inside. There was a small folded note. The note was in Austin's handwriting. It said simply, "I love you." I felt physically sick. That night, I showed Calvin the necklace and the note. He was shocked at first, and then he got angry. We talked about what to do. We knew this could cause a major rift in the family, but we couldn't ignore it. We decided to call his parents. They were shocked too. His dad was livid, but his mother tried to defend him. His father shut it down immediately, telling her no matter what, that it was inappropriate. Calvin made the decision to confront his brother. His dad agreed. The next day, we invited Austin to lunch. We brought the note. We started talking about it gently, and then Calvin just put the note on the table in front of Austin. I watched his face carefully. I saw a flicker of worry and panic before he managed to compose himself. I told Austin that I found the note deeply inappropriate and that I couldn't let it slide any longer. Calvin asked him point blank if he had romantic feelings for me. He said it seemed like the only explanation for his behavior over the years. Austin started laughing nervously. He then launched into this elaborate explanation. He said he'd been secretly seeing a woman named Anna for the past year. He claimed he bought 2 similar necklaces, one for Anna and one for me as a birthday gift. He said the note was meant for Anna, and he had no idea how it had ended up in the necklace he'd given to me. He denied having any romantic feelings for me whatsoever. Calvin and I were speechless. It was such an unexpected explanation. It sounded crazy, but it was also kind of believable. It was the sort of bizarre mix-up that could happen. Calvin, still skeptical, asked him more about this Anna. Austin gave us details, and then he showed us pictures of himself with her. She was beautiful, and Austin genuinely looked happy in the photos. It lent credibility to his story. I felt a wave of relief. Austin's explanation and the photos made sense. I was happy for him that he'd found someone. Austin apologized profusely and sincerely for the confusion. He promised to be more careful in the future. We all had a good laugh about it, the tension completely gone. We agreed never to speak of it again. It was a closed chapter, a weird misunderstanding. Austin eventually married Anna. She seemed perfect for him. They both loved adventure and seemed genuinely happy. But it didn't last. This year, Austin was caught cheating on Anna. He'd been communicating with multiple women on dating apps. It turned out Anna was also cheating, having an affair with a coworker. They decided to get a divorce, admitting they weren't compatible. Austin moved back in with his parents. He's been living there for the past 2 months. He also lost his job because of his depression after the divorce. He spends his days in his room playing video games. Calvin has tried to intervene, encouraging him to find a new job, but it hasn't worked. Whenever Calvin and I visit his parents, Austin is always there, and he started paying excessive attention to me again. He'd get uncomfortably close when he talked to me. At first, I didn't really register it. I thought maybe it was just because he was depressed. But then there was this incident with a video game. Austin was teaching Calvin and me how to play one of his games. Calvin got an important work call and had to step away. Austin was showing me how to use the controller, and he sat very close to me. He put his hand over mine on the controller, supposedly to guide me, but his hand lingered there for much longer than necessary. It made me incredibly uncomfortable. I immediately got up and went to find Calvin. I asked him to take me home. He could tell something was wrong. On the drive home, I told him about Austin's hand-holding and how uncomfortable it made me. Calvin was furious. He wanted to confront Austin right then and there, but I convinced him not to. I was worried that if we confronted Austin while he was living with his parents, he might get kicked out, making the situation even more awkward. I was also afraid that my mother-in-law wouldn't believe me and would accuse me of causing trouble. I made a decision, though. I would never let my guard down around Austin again, and I would never be alone with him. Then the unthinkable happened. Calvin was in a serious car accident. A truck hit his car from behind while changing lanes. It was terrifying. When I got the call from the hospital, I thought I might lose him. His parents, mother-in-law, father-in-law, and Austin were informed, and they all rushed to the hospital. They were genuinely concerned, which I appreciated. Austin, surprisingly, was very supportive, constantly checking in and offering to help. My own parents, worried sick, flew in to be with me. Calvin started to recover, but it was a slow process. At first, he was only allowed one visitor at a time. I visited him every day. I'd read to him, play his favorite music, anything to comfort him. I was so incredibly grateful that he was alive and fighting to get better. His parents visited regularly too, but a disturbing pattern emerged. Whenever Austin came with them, instead of focusing on Calvin, Austin would direct most of his attention to me. He'd hug me a lot, touch my cheeks, and tell me to remain strong. He'd say things like, if anything were to happen to Calvin, he'd be there for me. It was so inappropriate and uncomfortable. I actively tried to distance myself from him, but it was difficult in the close confines of the hospital room. His mother would also encourage it, constantly mentioning how I shouldn't be alone. During one visit, Calvin, trying to lighten the mood, made a joke. He said that if anything were to happen to him, I could always be with his brothers since they all look so similar. It was a terrible joke, and it hit me hard. I just went silent. Calvin immediately realized he'd messed up and apologized, but I broke down. Calvin leaned forward despite his injuries to comfort me. He was so concerned. I finally told him everything. I said I could never be with Austin because I didn't love him, and I never had beyond that initial silly crush. I told him how frustrated I was that people didn't seem to take my feelings seriously. I confessed my long-held suspicion that Austin had never gotten over me and that he still had romantic feelings. I told him about Austin's inappropriate behavior during the hospital visits, the touching, the comments, and I also told him that I believed my mother-in-law was aware of Austin's feelings and was actively enabling his behavior, turning a blind eye to it all. Calvin apologized sincerely. He realized how much I'd been holding in, how much of a burden I'd been carrying. He admitted that he too had long suspected that Austin had feelings for me, but he'd given his brother the benefit of the doubt for far too long. It was a huge relief to finally be on the same page. After a moment, Calvin came up with a plan. He said we needed to expose both Austin and his mother, and we needed concrete proof. The plan was for me to call my mother-in-law and ask for financial help with the medical bills. The idea was this. If she genuinely cared about both her sons equally, she'd offer to help without hesitation. But if she hesitated, made excuses, or attached conditions to her help, it would strongly suggest she was aware of an underlying agenda. I agreed to the plan. The next day, I met my mother-in-law in the hospital cafeteria. I started by talking about how expensive the medical bills were, how worried I was about the financial strain. To my surprise, she immediately and unconditionally offered to pay the bills. I felt a moment of relief. Maybe I'd been wrong about her. But then she dropped the other shoe. She said that I should move in with her and her husband and Austin until Calvin fully recovered. She said I shouldn't be alone in an empty house during such a vulnerable time. And then she added, crucially, that Austin was lonely and missed his brother, implying that I could provide him with company. I felt sick to my stomach. The implications of her words were clear and disgusting. She wasn't just offering help. She was trying to create a situation where Austin and I would be living together. She, seemingly oblivious to how inappropriate her suggestion was, went on to further suggest that Austin and I could possibly work on a friendship and how we are similar. She followed up with proposing I could get with him until Calvin got better. I got up from my seat. I thanked her for her honesty and then revealed that I've been recording the entire conversation on my phone. I told her I was going to share the recording with Calvin, that her plan was exposed. Her face went white. She started to panic, trying to backtrack. I accused her of knowing about Austin's feelings and actively encouraging them. She tried to calm me down, saying that falling in love is not a crime. She tried to justify her actions by saying she knows when her sons are in love, and that Austin rightfully deserved me because he loved me first. It was an incredibly entitled and delusional thing to say. I told her I would let her husband know of this and have Austin kicked out. I walked away. I refused to engage with her any further. I was disgusted and heartbroken. I had the proof I needed. I was really anxious and scared to share this with Calvin though. Update 1. Hey Reddit, thanks for all the comments and support. It's been helpful to read your perspectives while I'm here at the hospital with Calvin. It's given me some strength to deal with all of this. Once he's out and safely home, I'm going to follow his lead on whatever he wants to do, but I'm definitely going to be open and honest with him about everything. I wanted to address a few things that came up in the comments. Some people suggested that I might have encouraged Austin's feelings in some way. I want to be clear, I did not. My initial crush on Austin was a typical fleeting college thing. When I realized he wasn't my type and that he was playing games, I respectfully told him I wasn't interested. Yes, I ended up falling in love with his brother, which I know isn't ideal, but it happened. I shouldn't be blamed for that. Calvin is the man I married, the man I've remained loyal to, and the man I hope to have a family with. I love him deeply. There's no part of me that has ever wanted to be with Austin beyond that initial superficial attraction. Also, some people asked about the financial situation. We never actually needed help with the medical bills. We both have good jobs and good health insurance. Asking for financial help was a plan to test my mother-in-law's reaction, to see what she would say and do. She fell for it completely, revealing what I'd had long suspected, that she knew about Austin's feelings and was somehow okay with them, even encouraging them. I'm utterly disgusted by her thoughts and actions. I can never feel safe around her again. I realize now that she's always favored Austin, and she's been inappropriately encouraging his behavior for years. Update 2. Hi everyone, another update. It's been about a month and a half since my original post. Calvin is finally home from the hospital. He's almost completely recovered, which is amazing. I finally told Calvin everything about the conversation with his mother, including the recording. I waited until he was home and settled because I didn't want to stress him out while he was still recovering. His initial reaction was laughter. He thought the whole situation, his mother's plan, was so absurd that it was almost comical. But then I played him the recording. His laughter stopped. He was in pain, disbelief. He couldn't believe his own mother would say those things, would try to do something like that. He asked me why I hadn't told him sooner, and I explained that I was worried about his health. He understood. He agreed that we needed to confront his father about it. He was disgusted with his mother's behavior, and he was deeply disappointed in Austin. I was so relieved that he felt the same way I did, that we were on the same page. We decided to talk to his father-in-law the next day. I was nervous about it, to be honest. This whole situation is so emotionally charged. Update 3. In just 1 week, our lives and the lives of my mother-in-law and Austin have been completely turned upside down. Calvin spoke to his father about everything. His father's first reaction was to apologize to me. He said he considered me as much his daughter as Calvin was his son, and I should never have hesitated to come to him with my concerns. He apologized on behalf of Austin and promised that Austin would never bother me again. He was so supportive and understanding. It meant the world to me. After the phone call with Calvin, my father-in-law immediately confronted Austin, who was still hiding in his room. He screamed at Austin. My father-in-law is a big guy, 6 feet 2 inches and an army vet, so I can only imagine how intimidating that must have been. He ordered Austin to leave the house. He basically disowned him for his actions. My mother-in-law tried to intervene, to defend Austin as usual, but my father-in-law delivered a scathing rebuke to his wife. He told her he was ashamed and disgusted by her outrageous plan and her enabling of Austin's behavior. He accused her of failing as a mother by allowing Austin to become such a pervert. It was harsh, but honestly, I think it was justified. He didn't stop there. He told my mother-in-law that she had to leave the house with Austin. Both mother and son are now effectively homeless. They're living in a motel. Both Austin and my mother-in-law have sent me multiple messages over the past few days. They're blaming me for the fallout with my father-in-law, accusing me of breaking up the family. My mother-in-law has been desperately trying to reach out to my father-in-law, begging for reconciliation. He's given her an ultimatum. She has to go to therapy to understand why she thought it was acceptable to encourage her son to pursue his brother's wife. Only if she goes to therapy and shows genuine remorse will he even consider letting her back into his house. Austin called Calvin, begging for forgiveness, but Calvin expressed his profound disappointment in Austin. He told him he was ashamed to have him as a brother. He warned Austin that he must never contact me again, or we would pursue legal action for harassment. The news of all this has spread throughout the extended family. Some relatives are shocked, but others have said that there had always been an underlying favoritism towards Austin from my mother-in-law. Calvin's extended family has been incredibly supportive of us. Everyone agrees that my mother-in-law's actions were incredibly inappropriate and weird. She's currently being shunned and taunted by the extended family. I also told my own parents everything. They were equally weirded out and disgusted by the situation. I just want to move on from this. I want to live a peaceful life with my husband. I'm grateful for my father-in-law's support, that he believed us. I truly believe that cutting ties with my mother-in-law and Austin is the right decision for our well-being and our future. All I want is to continue living my wonderful life with my sweet husband by my side. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Gave up my dream college to help Dad's business after he promised it would be mine, but later he gave it to my brother and called me a loser. Now they're bankrupt and begging for help. When I 27F was 18, I got accepted into my dream college. It was something I worked so hard for. It wasn't just any school either. This was a school with one of the best programs in the country for what I wanted to do. I had worked really hard for that acceptance. I worked hard to balance my grades with extracurriculars, and honestly, I was over the moon about it. It felt like all my hard work was finally paying off, and I could see my future unfolding in front of me. But right before I was about to accept my offer, my dad sat me down for a serious talk. He had started a small business a few years back, and while it wasn't failing, it was definitely struggling. He was overwhelmed, working long hours, and couldn't keep up with the growth he was trying to push for. I knew he had been putting in long hours to try to keep it afloat. He told me he was in over his head and couldn't manage things on his own anymore. He said that if I stayed and helped him grow the business, it would be mine one day. It would be our legacy, and it would be something I could eventually pass on to my own kids. He made it sound like this incredible opportunity, but I was torn between two opportunities. On the one hand, I had my whole future planned out with college, internships, and eventually a dream job in my chosen field. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the guilt. This was my dad, someone who had always provided for me, and he needed me. Plus, the idea of owning a business one day did sound appealing. I thought maybe I could help him out for a while, learn the ropes, and eventually take it over like he promised. I thought about it for days. It wasn't an easy decision, but in the end, I turned down my college acceptance. It wasn't because I didn't want to go, but because I genuinely believed I could help the business grow and maybe, just maybe, build something bigger for my future than a degree could offer. I wasn't giving up on my dreams. I was just taking a different path, or at least that's what I told myself. For the next 8 years, I put everything into that business. The first few years were hard, but the business eventually started to grow. I worked my butt off. I'm talking long hours, weekends, the whole 9 yards. I pretty much sacrificed my entire social life because I was convinced that this business was going to be my future. Eventually, I wasn't just an employee, but I was basically running the place alongside my dad. Slowly but surely, the business started to grow. We gained more clients, made more money, and things were looking good. It felt rewarding to see the fruits of my labor, and I thought that all my hard work was going to pay off. I was so invested because I believed this was going to be my future. My dad kept reminding me that one day this company would be mine. All of that made me feel, for the longest time, that I had made the right decision to stay with my dad in the business. Then, about 2 years ago, out of nowhere, my younger brother, we'll call him James, 24M, decided that he didn't like his current career in tech anymore. He had been doing pretty well for himself, but he claimed it wasn't fulfilling and that he wanted to join the family business. He had always been the golden child. My parents couldn't stop ranting and raving about how smart and talented he was, even when he barely lifted a finger. So when he announced that tech wasn't fulfilling for him anymore and that he wanted to join the family business, I should have seen trouble coming, but at first, I thought it might not be so bad. I mean, we were both adults at this point, and whatever happened in the past was behind us. I even thought that maybe with both of us working together, the business would succeed even more. Well, I was dead wrong. The second James stepped into the business, my dad started treating him like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. Suddenly, all of my ideas and contributions were ignored, and everything James suggested was somehow brilliant, even if it was stuff I had been doing for years. My dad started giving him more responsibilities and credit for things I had been working on. It was like I didn't exist anymore, and it hurt. After everything I'd done to help build this company, I was being sidelined. It all came to a head when my dad called me into his office one day. He told me that I should step aside to give James the spotlight because he had the vision to take the business to the next level. I was flabbergasted. I had given up college, my friends, and my entire young adult life for this business, and now I was being asked to step aside like I was nothing. I refused, of course, but my dad made it clear that he didn't want me involved anymore. He said I should pursue something else and even had the nerve to say he regretted giving a chance to a loser like me. So just like that, I was out. I didn't get any warning or a single apology from my dad. I was just kicked out of the business I had helped build from the ground up. I was devastated, but I knew that I had no choice other than to move on. I left my parents' house, found a tiny apartment, and started looking for a job. But after years of running a business, I realized I didn't want to work for someone else. So I started my own consulting firm. It was tough at first, but I stuck with it. I used everything I had learned over the years to help small businesses grow and succeed. A year later, my firm took off. I landed a few big clients, and soon I was making more money than I ever had working for my dad. The business started getting attention in the local media and over social media because I also expanded into that field. Anyway, one day I was featured in a local newspaper as one of the rising stars in the industry. It felt amazing to finally get some recognition for my hard work, and wouldn't you know it, my dad reached out to me after that. After a year of not speaking to me at all, he suddenly called me up. He was all apologetic and sweet. He said he had made a mistake and that he was proud of me. He told me that he had seen the article about my success. I didn't really know what to say to him, but I awkwardly thanked him. He tried to continue making small talk, but I knew that he only called me because he needed something, so I asked him point blank what he wanted. He tried to say that it was nothing at first, but eventually, he told me that James was struggling with the business. Apparently, he wasn't as much of a genius as my dad thought. Wow, shocker. My dad then asked if I could come back and help him out, or at the very least share some of my success with my brother. To say I was furious would be the biggest understatement of the century. After everything they put me through, I can't believe that they had the nerve to ask for my help now. The same brother who took my place, the same dad who kicked me out, now wanted me to save their sinking ship. I told him that I had built my own success from scratch after he threw me away, and there was no way I was going to share it with anyone, especially not James. I told him clearly that I was not going to help him fix the mess he made. I didn't owe him or James anything, and I certainly wasn't going to bail them out after how they treated me. It's been a few days since the conversation with my dad, and honestly, I don't know if I'm being petty. I've been thinking it over, and now I'm beginning to feel bad about the way I spoke to my dad. Part of me feels like I should just let it go, but I can't shake the anger I feel about how they treated me. So, IDA for refusing to help them after what they did to me? Update 1. Hey everyone. Thanks so much for all the support and advice in the comments. I didn't expect this to blow up the way it did, but I figured I owe you all an update. A lot of people asked me about the work I actually did for my dad's business, so I'll start there and then get into what happened recently. So when I started working for my dad, the business was pretty outdated. They didn't even have a proper website or any online presence, not to mention a lot of things were being done manually. One of the first things I did was revamp the company's entire digital presence. I built a new website from scratch, set up social media accounts, and even worked on online ads, which brought in a lot more customers. I also helped optimize the supply chain, negotiated better deals with suppliers, and found ways to cut costs without sacrificing quality. On top of that, I developed some key partnerships with other local businesses, which really boosted our revenue. But despite all that, my dad never really gave me any credit. He always treated me like an assistant. In his head, it was like I was just helping out with small tasks and not the person who was actually driving the company's growth. Even when we saw a significant increase in profits, he'd act like it was just a stroke of good luck or timing and would never think or act like it was because of everything I did. It was frustrating, but I put up with it because I believed that someday the business would be mine like he promised. There were also a lot of questions about my brother James. To put it simply, he's always been the golden child in our family. He never really had any clear direction in life. He always tried a bit of everything but never stuck with anything. He barely did any work, and for some reason my parents still raised him to the heavens and back. My brother obviously basked in all their praise and essentially would do everything he could to rub it in my face. He would bully me a lot as a child and then convince our parents that I was the one in the wrong. Typical sibling stuff, except he never grew out of it. When he joined the company, he essentially acted like he was the boss. He'd convince my dad that whatever I was saying was wrong, and then he'd pitch the exact same thing I said, and my dad would love it. Yeah, he's that kind of guy. Anyway, we haven't really had the best relationship, and I'm actually comfortable with that now because of everything that's happened. After the last conversation I had with my dad, he wouldn't stop calling. He kept asking to meet up. He said that it was important and that we needed to talk. I ignored him for a while, but eventually my curiosity got the best of me. A lot of you pointed out in the comments that it would probably be best that I kept my distance from my dad and my brother, but I needed to know what my dad wanted. Part of me wanted to see if he had realized how wrong he was. I thought he'd maybe admit, at least partially, that he was wrong, but I wasn't expecting a full apology or anything. I agreed to meet up with my dad. When I got to the diner we were meeting at, I wasn't happy to see James there too. I thought it would just be my dad and me, but apparently my brother decided to tag along. Right off the bat, the meeting was tense. My dad didn't waste any time downplaying my success. He basically said that I got lucky with my business and that I should be grateful because without him, I wouldn't have the skills to succeed. He also threw in that I owed the family because I learned everything from working with him. That was infuriating to hear, especially after everything I did to help grow his business while getting zero credit. I told him that, and that only made my dad more frustrated than usual. My dad and I went back and forth for a while because I noticed that James started panicking. He admitted that he's been struggling since I left, which, I knew that that was the reason we had even met up that day. He told me that he had no idea how to run a business, and apparently things have gotten really bad. Just when I thought that at least my brother had some decency, he began blaming me for abandoning them. He said that if I hadn't left, none of this would be happening. Classic. I pretty much scoffed at him and told him to be real with me for a second. The only reason I even left the company was because our dad decided that James was better than me. Dad told me himself that I was a loser and that he regretted letting me handle the business. I had absolutely no blame on me at all. That's when James revealed that the business was on the verge of bankruptcy. My jaw dropped. When I left, business was thriving and it's only been a year. I couldn't believe it had gotten that bad so fast. James explained that our dad had been hiding the true financial records from him. Turns out, the business started failing right after my brother joined the company. My dad was covering it up the whole time because he hoped that things would magically turn around. Obviously, they didn't. They're deep in debt now, and the business is barely staying afloat. Apparently, A lot of deals I set up had either fallen apart or weren't renewed because my brother didn't know how to maintain them, lost suppliers and business partners, and customers started dropping off when the quality dipped. It was just a disaster all around. The meeting ended with them practically begging me to come back, not to run the business, mind you, but to help my brother so he could stay in charge. I think all I'm ever going to feel around them now is flabbergasted. After everything that happened, did they seriously expect me to swoop in, save the day, and let my brother take the credit again? I told them I'd think about it, but honestly, I don't see how I could ever go back. I'm really torn because part of me feels bad for my dad and the mess they're in, but at the same time, I know I'd just be walking into the same toxic situation all over again. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but I'll keep you all posted. Thanks again for the advice and for sticking with me through this. It helps more than you know. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and honestly, things just keep getting worse. Yesterday, I decided to reach out to my dad, not because I changed my mind about helping him, but because I wanted to see the financial records of the business. Something about this whole situation wasn't sitting right with me. If my brother really messed up the company, I needed to know how bad things were. I was still on the fence about helping them out because I had spent 8 years of my life pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into growing the company. That company was my baby, and the fact they ruined it so fast made my heart break. I wanted to know that if I made the decision to help them out, the company was salvageable. I figured the least I could do was check the records to confirm everything. Maybe it could also give me some closure, but when I actually saw the records, I think my eyes popped out of my skull in shock. At first, things looked normal. Payroll, vendor payments, and regular expenses, but as I kept digging, I noticed a ton of strange transactions. These weren't just the occasional extra charge either. There were recurring purchases that had absolutely nothing to do with the business, and they were all marked as business expenses. I'm talking about expensive personal shopping, luxury hotel stays, high-end electronics, and fancy dinners that didn't include any clients. It wasn't a case of someone accidentally mixing up personal and business accounts either. These charges were there so frequently that it was obvious that this was intentional. Whoever did it was burning through the company's money like it was their personal piggy bank. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why my dad would blow through company money that way. My dad had always been ridiculously strict about finances, and spending company money like this just wasn't something he would ever do. He's been running the business for years without a single issue, and then it hit me. It wasn't Dad, but it was his favorite child and now the CEO of the business, James. I immediately called James and asked if he was spending company money on personal expenses. I expected him to show at least a little regret or embarrassment, but instead, he admitted that he was the one spending business money for fun without any hesitation. He even told me that he wasn't sorry about it. According to him, I got to enjoy 8 years' worth of luxury because of my work at the company, and now it was his turn to enjoy that. I couldn't believe that he thought that I was sitting in the lap of luxury while working on my dad's business when in reality, I was sleeping maybe 4 hours max a day. After that phone call, I went straight to my dad to tell him what I found out. I laid everything out, every unnecessary purchase, every sketchy transaction, and told him that James was the one behind it all. I thought he'd be shocked or at least angry at my brother for jeopardizing the business, but considering James is my dad's favorite child who can do no wrong, I should not have expected him to react that way. Instead of being upset, my dad defended my brother. He told me that my brother was only acting out because he was stressed after I left the company. Apparently, my brother had been under so much pressure to manage things on his own that spending the money was his way of coping with everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My dad was trying to justify my brother's reckless spending by blaming me for leaving. I tried, and I mean really tried, to keep my emotions in check. I calmly explained to my dad that what he was saying didn't make any sense. I told him that the stress my brother felt didn't justify him blowing through the business's finances and putting the company at stake. But the more I talked, the angrier my dad got. He kept insisting that I just didn't understand and that I was being too hard on my brother. At that point, I realized there was no getting through to him. No matter what I said, my dad was determined to see me as the problem and my brother as the victim. Talking to him was like talking to a brick wall, so I left. But things didn't end there. This morning, I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone. They were all texts, emails, and DMs from clients and friends. Most of them were asking me if what they saw in the news was true. I had no idea what they were talking about, so I went online and found out that my dad went to the local news station and did an interview. In the interview, he dragged my name through the mud. He said that I abandoned the family business when it needed me the most. He made it sound like I was some selfish, spoiled brat who left them in the dust without a second thought. He blamed me for every issue the company was facing. He conveniently left out the part where he favored my brother's work over mine, gave him the business that he promised me, and James spent company money on things that had nothing to do with business, leading to the business's downfall. I can't even describe how I feel right now. I'm hurt, I'm angry, and honestly, I'm just lost. I thought I'd reached a point where I was okay with everything that happened to me, but my dad going to the press to slam me like that, it's a whole new level of humiliation and betrayal. And now I don't know what to do. I've worked so hard to build a good reputation, and this interview has put all of that at risk. I keep thinking about how many clients will believe what my dad said and whether this will hurt my business moving forward. I've always been proud of what I've built, and the idea that it could all come crashing down because of my own family makes me feel sick. I know I can't control what other people believe, but that doesn't make this any easier to deal with. I feel stuck. Part of me wants to fight back and set the record straight, but another part of me wonders if it's even worth it. All it will become is his drama for people to tune into, and it will not help my reputation at all. I don't know where to go from here, but I know one thing for sure. I can't keep letting my family pull me down. I've come too far to let them ruin everything I've built. I could really use some advice on what to do here, so feel free to give me your wildest and most creative ideas to set things straight. Thanks for reading if you made it this far, and I'll be sure to update you whenever this is sorted out. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been about 7 months since my last update, and wow, a lot has happened since then. First off, I just want to thank everyone who commented on my previous posts. I read through every single suggestion, and honestly, some of them had me laughing out loud. You all really helped make a dark time a lot lighter, and I appreciate it more than I can say. Now on to the update. After reading through the comments, I took some of your advice to heart and decided to consult a lawyer. I figured it was time to get serious about what was happening, especially after everything my dad had done with that interview. The lawyer told me I had a pretty solid case if I wanted to sue my dad for defamation and slander. He was dragging my name through the mud publicly, and it was impacting my reputation and business. At first, the idea of suing my own dad felt, wrong. I really struggled with it for days. I didn't want to take legal action against my own father. I mean, yeah, he betrayed me on more than one occasion, but did that really make it okay for me to sue him? But eventually, I came up with an idea that I thought would be a good compromise. So I reached out to my dad and asked him to meet up. I didn't tell him what it was about. I just wanted to get him there so we could talk. When we met, I didn't let him get a word in. I told him that I only asked him to meet me because he had a choice to make. I gave him 2 options. Either I sue him for defamation and slander, or he signs the business over to me, no strings attached, and he and my brother have nothing more to do with it. I told him that because he kept blaming me for ruining his business, this was his chance to prove it. He could either let me have it and see if I truly ruin it, or deal with a lawsuit and actually end his company. To say he was shocked would be an understatement. He was silent for a few seconds before he threw a huge fit. He started yelling about how I was being unreasonable and how I was trying to steal his business, but I stayed calm and serious the whole time. I told him I'd give him 3 days to make a decision, and if I didn't hear from him, I'd go ahead with the lawsuit. I walked out after that because I didn't want to deal with him yelling at me anymore. 3 days later, he called me and said he'd sign over the business. He wasn't happy about it at all. In fact, he made it very clear that he didn't want to give it to me, but I guess he realized he didn't have much of a choice. My brother, on the other hand, completely lost it when he found out. He threw a huge tantrum and accused me of stealing his company, but honestly, at that point, I didn't care anymore. They'd both made their choices, and now they had to live with them. The past few months have been hectic, to say the least. Managing my dad's old business while also running my own consulting firm has been a lot to handle, but I've been doing okay. It's been hard, especially with the bad press and all the damage my brother did. But I'm seeing slow improvements. I've been fixing the messes they left behind and rebuilding relationships with clients. While it's not an overnight success, things are moving in the right direction. Oh, and guess what? The same local news station that my dad went to for that awful interview reached out to me for my side of the story. I decided to take the high road in the interview. I didn't reveal too much or throw my dad under the bus. I just said that I was in a rough place and wasn't contributing much to the company, so I thought it would be best to leave my dad's firm. However, seeing my dad's interview made me realize that I needed to go back. So I took over the business because I felt terrible for my dad and wanted to help. It actually ended up working in my favor. People started seeing me as the bigger person, and it actually gave the business a much-needed boost in image. As for my dad and brother, I haven't spoken to either of them since the whole ordeal. They've completely cut me off. They've blocked me on everything and refused to respond to anything I send them. Stings, I won't lie. It hurts to know that they won't admit they were wrong and that they'd rather push me out of their lives than face reality. But at the same time, I feel weirdly relieved. I'm so glad that I don't have to deal with their drama anymore. And honestly, it feels like karma finally came back around for them. And I guess that's it. It's been a tough journey, but I'm proud of how far I've come. The business is slowly getting back on its feet, and my consulting firm is thriving. I've got my hands full, but at least I'm in control of my own life now. Thanks again to everyone who gave advice and supported me through all of this. You guys helped more than you'll ever know, and I'll forever be grateful to you. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Mill told my paralyzed dad he shouldn't walk me down the aisle because it was embarrassing. When we cut contact, she showed up at my house and tried to hurt me. I got married last week to my husband Chad. Right now we're supposed to be enjoying our honeymoon, but instead it's been incredibly stressful and difficult, largely because of the drama stirred up by Chad's mother Elizabeth during our wedding. For context, Elizabeth has been a major source of tension in our lives since the day Chad introduced me to her. She's never really liked me. She always had a very different idea of who her son should marry. According to Chad, his mother had her heart set on one of her family friend's daughters, but Chad had no interest in her. As a result, his mother was furious with him when he started dating me. She once even told me how I was just a temporary fling for Chad to play around with until he got bored. I was understandably furious and gave her back by saying Chad wasn't some prize to be won, and that I was having a lot of fun playing around with him too. Despite her strong disapproval, Chad has always stood by me. He always made it crystal clear to her and to everyone else in his family that he planned on spending the rest of his life with me. This would cause Elizabeth to get furious with him and even threaten to cut off all contact. But Chad's commitment to our relationship has never wavered. Things took a particularly harsh turn when Chad proposed to me and I said yes. He did not bother informing her as he was tired of her dissuading him, so she had to find out about our engagement from some of her mutual friends. This caused her to have an extreme reaction. She called Chad absolutely furious, yelling at him about how he had embarrassed her by not informing her about our engagement before telling everyone else. She was incensed that he had chosen to stay with me, someone she felt was unworthy of her son. Chad, always calm in these situations, explained that he had deliberately not shared the news with her to avoid any negativity. He didn't want to deal with her disapproval or let it ruin what was supposed to be a joyful moment for us. In response, Elizabeth made an extreme threat. If Chad really went through with marrying me, she would refuse to eat any food and would starve herself to death. Chad found her threats absurd and simply laughed it off. He told her that she could do whatever she wanted and even made a sarcastic comment that she might look better by losing a few pounds. This only fueled her anger further, and she became even more enraged. She then threatened to cut Chad off completely if he went ahead with the marriage, but he wasn't swayed by her ultimatum. Failing in her attempts to manipulate her son, Elizabeth then tried to reach out to me directly, attempting to persuade me that I was making a grave mistake by marrying her son without her blessings. Her messages were filled with hate, and she even went so far as to say that she hoped my soul would burn in hell for what I had done to her. It was a deeply hurtful and intense response, and I was sick and tired of her always trying to ruin our happy moment. As a result, when it came time to invite people to our wedding, we did not send Elizabeth an invitation. Chad's father, who had been invited, called us inquiring about why his wife had not received any invitation and how apparently she had been crying for hours in her room at this insult. Chad's father insisted that Chad and I come to his house for a sit-down with Elizabeth to resolve our issues and hopefully move past the whole drama. He made it clear that his family would be very upset if his mother was not included in our wedding. Reluctantly, Chad agreed, hoping that a face-to-face conversation might smooth things over. The next day we went to meet with Elizabeth, but the encounter was far from constructive. The following day we went to meet with his mother Elizabeth. From the moment we arrived, it was obvious that she wasn't interested in having a constructive discussion. Instead, she acted as though she were the victim in the situation. Throughout the conversation, Elizabeth stared angrily at me, her eyes filled with contempt, and it was clear she blamed me for everything that had gone wrong. Chad's father, trying his best to mediate, asked Elizabeth to apologize to us for everything she had done to cause this unnecessary tension and conflict. However, this suggestion only made her more furious. She exploded in anger, yelling at both Chad and his father and accusing them of being so foolish for not recognizing the kind of woman I was. She insisted that she only wanted what was best for her son, and I was clearly not good enough for him. I could feel my frustration building, so in an effort to get some clarity, I directly asked her why she had never approved of me from the beginning and what kind of woman she believed would be suitable for Chad. She expressed how she didn't like the fact that I was a working woman and that I earned as much as Chad. She went on to claim that women like me, women who are financially independent, would have no problem cheating on or leaving their husbands if things went south. Hence, I was not the right fit for the family. She argued that Chad needed a more homely woman who could take on the traditional role of a wife. Elizabeth also brought up how in her culture women were expected to do everything at home and only the men were supposed to work. She accused me of being selfish because according to her I made Chad do half of the work at home, which she believed was unacceptable. It was clear that her issue wasn't just with me, but with the bigger idea of gender roles in our relationship. Thankfully, Chad stood up for me. He told her that it was his choice to be a good partner by sharing household duties, and he liked that we both earned well. He reminded his mom how years ago when his dad lost his job they were almost homeless and had to ask for financial help from their grandparents. He pointed out how in our case if either of us lost our job we both knew the other could step in and take care of things without needing to borrow money from anyone. I felt so proud that Chad genuinely appreciated and understood me for who I am. Chad's father agreed with him and urged Elizabeth to see past her cultural beliefs and learn to accept me for who I am. Otherwise, they might end up losing out on their son forever. In the end, after much tension and debate, Elizabeth reluctantly agreed to step back and keep her opinions to herself regarding our relationship. While she didn't fully accept me, I wasn't particularly bothered by that. What mattered most to me was that she would stay out of our business and refrain from making any further comments, which is what I had always wanted. With that agreement in place, we moved forward with inviting her to the wedding. Throughout the planning of the wedding, Elizabeth did try to make things a bit difficult, but it was still manageable. However, one of the major issues arose when she insisted on wearing a very light blue dress to the ceremony, a color so pale it could almost be mistaken for white. Given the importance of the bride being the only one in white, this felt like a passive-aggressive move. I let my husband handle this situation and he very firmly made it clear to her that if she showed up in that dress we wouldn't hesitate to ask her to leave. Ultimately, she backed down from the light blue dress idea. However, on the wedding day she showed up in a black dress, as if she were attending a funeral instead of her son's wedding. It was a clear statement as if she wanted to signal her disapproval of the union. I could have let it upset me, but I chose to ignore it. I didn't want her attention-seeking antics to overshadow what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, so I decided to let it go, focusing on the joy of marrying Chad rather than allowing Elizabeth's behavior to steal the spotlight. As I was preparing to walk down the aisle and waiting for my dad to join me, so we could walk down the aisle together, Elizabeth approached me unexpectedly. I was already feeling a whirlwind of emotions, so when she asked to speak to me, I wasn't sure what to expect. She began by telling me that she had been speaking with some of her family members and had learned that my dad was going to be the one walking me down the aisle. I nodded, and without hesitation she went on to express that she didn't think it was the right thing for him to do. Confused and taken aback, I asked her why she felt that way. In response, she answered that because of my dad's condition it would not be a good look for the family and that people might talk. For context, my dad has been paralyzed from the waist down for the past 3 years ever since he and my mom were involved in a tragic car accident. My mom didn't survive, and while my dad miraculously lived, the accident left him unable to walk. It was an incredibly difficult time for our family, but despite everything I had always been grateful that my dad had survived. Over the years he worked hard to regain as much independence as he could. Initially when Chad and I had asked him to walk me down the aisle well to accompany me as I walked, my dad was overwhelmed with emotion. I could see how much it meant to him. He did express concerns that people might gossip or make comments about his condition, but I assured him that none of that mattered to me. He was my dad and I wanted him by my side. So Elizabeth's rude comment struck a nerve. I was stunned that she could say something so callous, especially on such an important day. Clearly, her focus was entirely on appearances, completely disregarding the emotional significance of the moment. My dad had been through so much, and for her to reduce his presence to a bad look for the family felt cruel and heartless. This is why me and Chad had intentionally kept the plan for my dad to walk me down the aisle from Elizabeth, knowing how harsh and critical she could be. But now that she had found out, she was adamant that I should change the plan. She insisted that because Chad's father had contributed towards the wedding, he should be the one to walk me down the aisle. According to her, my dad should just sit as a spectator and let a real man like her husband take on that honor. Her words stung like a slap in the face. The blatant disrespect towards my dad after everything he had gone through made my blood boil. Calling her husband a real man in comparison to my dad, who had survived so much and worked so hard just to be able to accompany me on this day, was too much. I was seeing red, and I swear if it hadn't been my wedding day I would have grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out of the venue right then and there. But before I could even get a word in to shut her down, my dad approached. He must have noticed the anger and frustration on my face because he immediately asked me what was wrong. At that moment I had to take a deep breath. I counted to 10, reminding myself that today was supposed to be about love, joy, and celebration, not about fighting with my mother-in-law. The last thing I wanted was for Elizabeth's negativity to cast a shadow over this special day. I smiled politely, swallowing the words I wanted to hurl at her, and told Elizabeth to please take her seat because I would be walking down the aisle with my dad as planned. She gave me a look of disapproval, shaking her head as if she was disappointed in me, but I didn't care. She turned and walked away to take her seat, and I was left standing there with my dad. No matter what Elizabeth thought or said, my dad was the one walking me down the aisle, and that was all that mattered. As I took my father's hand, I knew I had made the right choice. The rest of the wedding ceremony unfolded beautifully. As I walked down the aisle, Chad did notice that something seemed off about my expressions. I tried my best to hide the hurt and focus on the joy of the moment, but it was clear that the earlier conversation with his mother had affected me. After the ceremony, when we finally had a quiet moment together, Chad asked me what had happened. I didn't want to keep it from him, so I confessed everything Elizabeth had said, how she had tried to convince me to let his father walk me down the aisle instead of my own dad, claiming CL in my father's condition would be a bad look for the family. Chad was furious. His protective instincts kicked in immediately, and he told me that he was going to ask his dad to escort his mother out of the wedding immediately. He felt that she had crossed a line and had no right to be there after saying something so cruel. While I appreciated his support and understood his anger, I didn't want to make a scene. I knew that causing a commotion would only give Elizabeth the attention she seemed to crave. The last thing I wanted was for her to steal the spotlight on what was supposed to be our day. I urged Chad to let it go just for the evening. I reassured him that we could address the situation later in private once the wedding was over. Reluctantly, Chad agreed but did apologize to me repeatedly for what his mother had said. He was genuinely upset by her actions and promised we would deal with it later. For the rest of the evening, Chad and I did our best to savor every moment of the celebration, surrounded by friends and family who genuinely cared about us. When it was time for the speeches, both my father and my father-in-law gave incredibly heartfelt and emotional words. It was heartwarming to hear the love and pride in their voices. A few of my cousins and some of Chad's family members also took the microphone to share their joy about our union, offering kind words and well wishes. During all of this, I couldn't help but notice Elizabeth sitting in silence, drinking heavily. She seemed to be seething, her expression tight as if she were barely containing her frustration. I tried to ignore it, hoping that the rest of the evening would pass peacefully. But then one of our relatives, likely without realizing the tension, passed the microphone to Elizabeth and urged her to speak a few words for her son and his new bride. The moment the mic landed in her hands, I turned to look at Chad, worried about what she might say. He looked just as tense as I was. I prayed that his mother would simply offer a polite congratulations and wish us the best, then sit down without causing a scene. But deep down I feared Elizabeth wouldn't be able to resist taking a jab, and unfortunately I was right. Elizabeth stood up, slightly swaying perhaps because of the multiple drinks she had, and started announcing how she just couldn't believe her baby boy had got married. She said that as a mother nothing could be more joyful than watching her child become a grown man. She then paused, took a deep breath, and continued to say that her son's wedding was almost perfect, when it could have been even more perfect had the bride not allowed her father to walk her down the aisle. I gasped, utterly horrified. Elizabeth remarked on how uncomfortable it was to see a wheelchair person accompanying the bride, and how she felt pitiful that my dad couldn't even hug me or stand next to me properly. Everyone looked stunned at her speech. Her words were beyond cruel. They were demeaning and insensitive. My dad, who had been through so much, had every right to walk me down the aisle, and for her to humiliate him like that publicly, to reduce him to his disability in front of all our guests, was unforgivable. I could barely hold myself back from lashing out at her right then and there as she stood there holding the microphone, completely unbothered by the damage her words had caused. As Elizabeth continued her tirade, my husband gestured to the staff to cut off the microphone, but that didn't stop her. She kept going, now accusing my dad of being selfish for not stepping aside in the first place, claiming that as the bride's father he should have understood how the groom's family would be embarrassed to see him in a wheelchair. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes as I glanced over at my father, who sat there silently, his face flushed with humiliation as he absorbed every cruel word she hurled. Before she could insult us further, Chad, absolutely furious, stormed over to his mother and snatched the microphone from her hand. Without hesitation, he turned to his father and demanded that he escort her out of the venue. There was no argument or hesitation from his dad. He stood up immediately, clearly ashamed of Elizabeth's behavior. He grabbed her arm, trying to pull her away from the situation, but Elizabeth resisted. The entire room fell into stunned silence, guests looking on in shock and disbelief. Some of them looked mortified while others averted their eyes, unsure of what to do. I felt my heart shatter as I saw the look of embarrassment and pain on my father's face. He had done nothing but love and support me, and now he had been humiliated in front of everyone on my wedding day. I felt sick to my stomach, devastated that this was happening. As Elizabeth was being removed, she kept shouting drunkenly that she was only speaking the truth and that other guests thought the exact same thing. That was when Chad, filled with anger and disgust, shouted at her that he was ashamed of having a parent like her and for her to get the hell away from us. He told her that he never wanted to see her face ever again. Security and Chad's father eventually managed to physically drag Elizabeth out of the venue as she continued to curse at me. It was surreal, like something out of a nightmare. I was shaken, and all I could think about was my father. I rushed over to him, my heart breaking as I saw how hurt he was. He tried to reassure me that he was okay, but I could see how embarrassed and anxious he felt after hearing her words. Elizabeth had successfully turned what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life into a memory tainted by her cruelty. Ever since then, Chad and his dad have repeatedly apologized to my dad for everything. They feel horrible about everything. Elizabeth has also been trying to get in touch with us, but we haven't answered her calls. Aita for suggesting to my husband that we should permanently cut his mother out of our lives. I don't want to begin our marriage on the wrong note, and I don't know where my husband's head is at, but I just want us to stand by our words and never see her again. Update 1. For everyone asking, our wedding guests were as embarrassed by Elizabeth's speech as we were. None of them agreed with her behavior. After Elizabeth was escorted out, many guests approached me to express their sympathy and frustration, describing Elizabeth's actions as ridiculous and unacceptable. They assured me that they did not agree with her behavior and were supportive of Chad's decision to stand up for me. Some of Chad's cousins even shared that Elizabeth had always had a history of being unhinged when it came to her only son, but they also expressed their pride in how Chad had handled the entire situation. As for my husband, I finally had a serious conversation with him about his mother, which I had been avoiding since we were still on our honeymoon. I explained to him how I couldn't stop thinking about the humiliation and the way Elizabeth's words had affected me and my family. I also made it clear that I couldn't endure any more of her toxic behavior and expressed my desire for us to cut her out of our lives to prevent any further harm. Chad listened carefully, his face reflecting the same pain and frustration I felt. He agreed with me and acknowledged that Elizabeth's behavior was completely unacceptable. He told me that he planned to meet with his parents after our honeymoon to let them know about our decision. Chad made it clear that if his father opposed the decision to cut Elizabeth out from our lives, then he was even prepared to take a stand and cut his father off as well. Honestly, it's such a relief that my husband is not as crazy as his mother. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update. I would like to thank everyone for constantly checking up on me. As for the update, when Chad finally confronted his parents about his decision, the reaction was as difficult as we had anticipated. His mother was particularly distraught, pleading with him to reconsider and trying to make him feel guilty for cutting her out of our lives. She even went so far as to suggest that Chad and she could maintain a relationship without my presence, implying that he didn't have to be a coward and simply follow his wife's wishes. Chad, firm in his decision, refused to be swayed by their pleas or threats. He made it clear to her that our relationship always comes first and left them to process the news, knowing that we needed to prioritize our own mental health and well-being, even if it meant severing ties with his mother. Since then, Elizabeth has been relentless in her attempts to contact me. She has bombarded me with messages and voicemails which have only grown more aggressive over time. Initially, I considered blocking her everywhere, but a friend suggested that I keep a record of all her communications. This way, if the situation escalates further, I would have a documented history of her behavior, which could be useful in pursuing a restraining order if in her voicemails necessary. In her voicemails, Elizabeth has made several threats against me. She has expressed her intentions to destroy my life and even voiced her hopes that I never become a mother. The threats have been disturbing and deeply unsettling, making it clear that her anger and bitterness were far from resolved. Update 3. Okay, I am surprised by how some of y'all guessed right. Today Elizabeth showed up at our house unannounced, and of course Chad wasn't home. I was alone and felt a surge of anxiety when I heard the loud banging on the door. Looking at the door camera, I saw Elizabeth standing outside, visibly agitated and distressed. I had no intention of letting her in since it could lead to another explosive confrontation, and I just didn't have the emotional energy to deal with her right now. I spoke to her through the Ring doorbell, informing her that Chad wasn't at home and that she was not welcome to hearing my voice. She became even more agitated. She began shouting at me, calling me a home wrecker and accusing me of deliberately keeping her child away from her. I remained quiet as I did not want to escalate. However, she then started using derogatory words and even threatened to strangle me if she ever caught me outside. Her threat shook me up, and I knew then enough was enough. I had to take action to protect myself. I warned her that I would call the police if she didn't leave. This only seemed to escalate her aggression. In a fit of rage, Elizabeth dropped her bag and began kicking the door with a terrifying force. Given her size and the way she was acting, I was genuinely scared. Her physical aggression made me fear for my safety. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, I immediately called the police. I explained the situation to them, detailing Elizabeth's threats and her violent behavior at my door. While waiting for the police to arrive, I stayed by the door camera, watching her every move. She looked like a maniac trying to break open our door. I also called my husband and told him about the situation. He assured me that he would immediately leave work and drive back to our place. When the police finally arrived, Elizabeth showed no sign of calming down. Even in front of the officers, her outbursts continued, and she openly expressed how she wanted me dead. This level of hostility left the officers with no choice but to arrest her on the spot. It was surreal and frightening to see her being taken away. Once Elizabeth was in custody, the officers took a statement from me. They reassured me that she would be spending the night in jail, and they promised to follow up on the situation. Despite the lingering fear and distress, I felt a small sense of relief knowing that at least for now I was safe and the immediate threat was under control. When Chad came home, he found me in tears on the sofa. He wrapped me in a comforting embrace, trying to soothe me. It was clear that he was as upset and bewildered as I was about his mother's behavior. We both realized that this situation couldn't be simply brushed aside. Elizabeth's actions have crossed a line that warrants serious consequences. Together we have both agreed that we need to take decisive action to ensure this won't happen to us again. Dropping the case against her is not an option. We want her to be held accountable for her threats to my life and her aggressive behavior. It is important to us to pursue legal action not just for our own peace of mind, but also to prevent any future incidents. Update 4. Hello Redditors, it's been 5 months since my last update. A lot has happened since then. First of all, Elizabeth was found guilty of harassment and was sentenced to pay a heavy fine as well as perform mandatory community service. The court also issued a restraining order to ensure she would not be able to contact me or come near me ever again. In the aftermath, Chad's father has reached out to me to apologize repeatedly. He expressed deep regret over the way things had turned out. While his apology didn't erase the damage done, it was a step toward acknowledging the seriousness of Elizabeth's behavior and taking responsibility for it. Initially, when my father learned about the whole ordeal, he took matters into his own hands. Despite his own physical challenges, he visited Elizabeth and her husband in person after she was released on bail. He made it clear to them that although he was paralyzed, he would not hesitate to protect me and ensure that Elizabeth faced serious consequences if she ever dared to threaten me. He reminded them that he had a gun and would not hesitate to use it if she ever tried to come near me again. I am sure Elizabeth must have been appalled and shaken up to see my dad so furious. Also, I decided to make a Facebook post to address the situation more publicly and to ensure that everyone understood the gravity of Elizabeth's actions, so that she could not manipulate the story later in it. I detailed the harassment and included the video footage of Elizabeth shouting at me and attempting to kick our door down. My goal was to expose her dangerous behavior and ensure that our family and friends knew the truth. Chad and I have made the decision to move to a new home, one whose location we will keep confidential except from a select few trusted individuals. We're hopeful that this move will provide us with the fresh start we need. If Elizabeth attempts to violate the restraining order or harass us again, she will face some serious jail time. Currently, we're focused on building a positive future and are determined not to let Elizabeth's actions dictate our lives any longer. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Crazy stepmom abandoned my dad while he was fighting cancer, and it turns out he had secret video evidence of her cheating, and he left her almost nothing in his will. Hi, so I, 24FM, am writing about an incident which happened to me recently. I come from a pretty wealthy background, with my father being a movie producer. We live in a small country by the ocean, so there is a good chance my dad isn't that well known internationally. My 48-year-old dad, let's call him Theo, had met my mother when they both were my age, 24, and got married after she got pregnant with me. Unfortunately, due to some unforeseen complications during pregnancy, my mother passed away right after giving birth to me. My dad had been a single parent since then for almost 10 years. No doubt he got a lot of offers from very attractive women, but he always prioritized me over his personal relationships. My dad had amassed a lot of wealth during his initial years, and so we shifted to a more film-centered city when I was 12. I had a lot of trouble settling into the new school because of bullying. There were 2 guys in my grade who daily used to make fun of me because of how I was dressed. My dad dressed me, and the limits were crossed when they accidentally pushed me down 2 stairs. My dad was called to the school but didn't meet the bullies or their parents because of his hectic schedule. My dad had always been there for me, but he wasn't able to be present much due to his hectic job, and so he decided to send me back with my grandparents, at least until I was able to adjust to a new setting. My grandparents have been absolute angels and have raised me like I was their own child. My dad did come back on holidays and other family events, but that's all I saw of him for the next 6 years, so it is safe to say that I grew distant from him. I started to realize something was fishy when I heard my grandparents whisper about something that was related to my father. I was 15 during this, so I directly confronted them and asked about the issue, in hopes that it was about my dad finally taking me back with him. That is when my grandparents told me that my dad had married this woman he met during the shooting of his show. They told me my dad and the woman, let's call her Lisa, were arriving the day before and were going to visit us. I wasn't pleased with this because my dad started a new family after abandoning me. But because I didn't have any say, I powdered and waited for them to come. Lisa had a very off vibe from the moment she stepped inside my grandparents' home. I could feel all her pretentious behavior of being very kind towards me, but just for the sake of my dad. I was glad at that moment that I didn't live with my dad anymore. On talking further, it was revealed that she was a divorcee with 2 kids who I might get to meet if I ever visited my dad's mansion. My dad did ask me if I wanted to leave with him because I was old enough now, but I outrightly denied it, feeling hurt and abandoned by him, and so they left. Later on, talking with my grandparents, I realized we all had the same instinct about Lisa pretending to be nice. Anyway, that was over and I completed my education in my grandparents' town. I worked extremely hard at school in order to get into a film school and was able to get into the best one along with a few others, but the problem was that it was in the city where my dad and his family lived. I was happy on my own and was fine with my grandparents, but I feared that if I went to my preferred college, I would have to face restrictions from my dad. I have always had an interest in technical jobs at the set, basically camera work. Once my dad got to know that I had been selected in the best college in his city, he was ecstatic to have me back home. I did make it clear to him that if I stayed in the city, I didn't wish to be kept tabs on by him or his family at all times, to which he agreed. I was still doubtful, but on my grandparents' repeated requests, I decided to join the course. My dad invited me to his home, which at first I denied, but on repeated insistence from both him and Lisa, I decided to give them a visit. When I reached my dad's mansion, by the looks of it, it didn't look like I ever lived there. The walls were full of pictures of Lisa with her kids, and some of my dad. Dad looked pretty thin and pale, so I was concerned about him. My dad offered to pay my fee and asked me to stay at their place for as long as I wished, but I said no, as I didn't wish any pity funds from him. I applied for a student loan and got into the college dorm. As I was about to leave in the afternoon, I met Lisa's kids, who were just back from their acting coaching classes. I got the biggest shock of my life when I realized they were the kids who had bullied me when I was young. I wanted to tell my dad about it, but to be honest, I didn't really know him or his response, so I called my grandparents and told them about this. They told me I had done the right thing by not telling this to my dad because it had now been a few years into his and Lisa's marriage, and there was a good chance it might spoil my relationship with him. I obliged and talked to the bullies, James and Jake, both 24M, for formality's sake, and left as soon as I could. I had heard about the shenanigans of Jake and James from my grandparents. Apparently, their biological father was a rich businessman who didn't wish to leave his kids, but Lisa somehow decided to blame him for domestic violence and brought the kids into her new marriage. My dad didn't wish to have any more kids but agreed to it for Lisa. He had known Jake and James since they were 15, and they had never failed to remind my dad that they weren't his children. He used to provide them with everything he could afford only for them to berate him to his face in front of their relatives. And these two were also a reason why I was kept away from my dad. Lisa should have tried to calm things down and explain to them the new dynamics, but she couldn't care less about it all, and it overall affected my dad. Their relationship has been DIY since the beginning, but after having me in the city, my dad finally felt he had someone he could trust. He had indirectly mentioned to me here and there about how his relationship with Lisa was. He said that she spends a good amount of the money he makes in the name of promoting her kids, which he feels isn't true. I didn't wish to interfere in their relationship, so I decided to stay quiet and listen to him rant. One thing I was sure of was that the marriage might fail soon. Over the period of my course, I used to visit my dad and his family on the weekends. I didn't feel welcomed at their house, so I stopped after a while but had to revisit as it was revealed soon after I joined college that my dad had cancer in the last stage and had just a few years left because of how aggressive it was. It was difficult to see my father in pain, but what hurt more was how unhappy he was in his marriage. It was because of him Jake had gotten a short recurring role in a sitcom, but it was never like Lisa's kids treated him like a father figure. I could see how hard my dad tried to build a connection with them only for them to treat him like an ATM, and what was more unfortunate was that Lisa never saw this as a problem. By the time my father was on his deathbed, Lisa had stopped visiting him in the hospital and rarely showed up. My dad cried a lot to me during his final days, feeling abandoned by his wife and stepchildren, and although I wasn't very close to my dad, I still couldn't forget his pain of being alone. I also tried to talk to Lisa about looking after my father, but her very insensitive reply was that she would rather look after her future and wait for someone to become past. It is safe to say that she was the worst of humans I had ever met, and my dad passed away soon after I finished my course. Lisa was there at my father's wake for 15 minutes at max when the big people of the industry showed up, whereas her sons didn't even care to show faces for their stepdad. I had decided from that day on that I wasn't going to consider these people family ever and decided to head to another state to pursue my career in film. I was planning to leave a week after the wake but was summoned by Dad's lawyer to his mansion at the earliest. When I reached, I saw Lisa and her kids sitting there impatiently. Dad's lawyer told us that before passing away, he had declared his will and wished to give me almost 70% of his assets, including this mansion. He left 20% of his wealth for his parents, they were pretty well off already, and 10% plus a condo in the city for Lisa and her children. He had also left a final message for me, apologizing to me for not being the father he wished to be. I got overwhelmed and emotional at all this, but the real shocker had come to Lisa and her kids. She gave me an angry look before leaving the mansion and raged. I asked Dad's lawyer what the consequences of this could be, and he assured me that I had nothing to worry about, as whatever those three plan on doing would definitely be illegal. I decided to cancel my plan of moving to another state as I had a home to myself now. I called Lisa soon after and asked her to take all her and her kids' stuff away as this wasn't their home anymore. Lisa was obviously upset and asked why I was being so cruel to them after knowing what they were going through. I happily replied that I'd rather look at the future than my past, and she cut the call after having a taste of her own medicine. I did get a few nasty texts from her for some days, but I enjoyed her being miserable after what she had done. I had left the mansion for the weekend to visit my grandparents and tell them what had gone down. They weren't as shocked as I was because they had suspected Lisa's intentions for a long time but were glad that she was getting karma for treating their son like a broken thing during his last days. I had a good weekend with them and went back to the city only to have my mansion's door already opened. I suspected a burglary and called the cops and Dad's lawyer. He was the only person I knew well enough immediately. When the cops went in, they realized it was Lisa and her children who had broken into the house while I was gone. They were clearly acting stupid and mentioned their reason for breaking in was because this was their home, and no one could kick them out. They also blamed Dad's lawyer for making a fake will in collaboration with me because there was no way Theo, Lisa's dear husband and James and Jake's father, could do them so dirty and leave them with nothing. The cops were angry at this immature behavior and were ready to arrest them, but my dad's lawyer asked me to not send them to jail just yet because he had a better plan. I suspected his intentions but still decided to listen to him and asked the cops to not press charges just yet. Dad's lawyer took the cops aside and told them something, after which they left almost immediately. He invited me inside the house along with Lisa and her kids and asked us to wait for a few minutes while he left to bring something to show us. I was scared for my life left alone with them, but Lisa knew better than to get arrested for assault, so we sat and waited while those three kept berating me for fraud. Soon, Dad's lawyer showed up with a box in his hands. What he told us next was something no one had expected. So apparently, my dad had known for a while now that Lisa was cheating on him. When he started getting sick and her behavior changed towards him drastically, he talked to his lawyer and, in order to safeguard my interests for the future, added another point in the will that the share he was going to give Lisa and her children could increase by 30%, taken from my share, given that she has been faithful to him for the rest of the time he was alive, and this would happen only if Lisa consented to it. She immediately said yes, and my dad's lawyer handed her the paper to sign, consenting to this arrangement. Lisa's face lit up hearing this, but it was all going to come crashing in a few seconds. It was also mentioned in this arrangement that if Lisa is found guilty of cheating with proof, then she would also end up losing the initial 10% she got. She signed the consent form irrespective, considering that there was no way any evidence against her could be gathered. After everyone was clear with the arrangement, my dad's lawyer proceeded to take out a pen drive and a set of papers from that box. He handed the papers to me and played the videos on his laptop. Apparently, my dad had secretly installed a CCTV in the living room to catch Lisa. Not only did it catch Lisa with another man in the house, but also recorded some intimate situations which assured that she was indeed cheating on my dad during their marriage. The papers he handed me were some pictures of Lisa with the guys she was cheating on my dad with. I know this sounds like the plot of a good TV show, But I guess Dad had learned a lot from his career since Lisa had now signed the paper that she would get nothing. Her face turned pale, realizing what she had done. She immediately began throwing a hissy fit that this was unfair to her and her children, and that she should have been told about the proof being present. My dad's lawyer reminded her that even this conversation, where the clear rules of the will were stated, had been recorded in the CCTV camera right behind her, and that she should now go and pack her stuff to leave the condo she was given soon. James handled his mother and left with her because they knew they were stuck now. My dad's lawyer before leaving asked me to be prepared for a court case and get the locks changed as soon as possible to avoid further breaking in. I listened to his advice and immediately called my grandparents, telling them about how dramatic everything had turned out to be. My grandparents decided to come stay with me for the next few days to ensure my safety. Update 1. I am adding this update after 2 days to the actual incident. So, as my dad's lawyer had expected, Lisa with her kids went to their lawyer, and they decided to sue me for a larger share in the inheritance on the grounds that she was deceived into signing the contract and didn't believe the will was written by my dad but was signed by him under force. To be honest, I don't know how she is planning to prove these exaggerated claims, but my dad's lawyer has assured me that the case is still in our favor, so practically there is nothing to worry about. After messing with me, Lisa decided to go to my grandparents in order to convince them to be on her side and support her having a better share of the inheritance for her and her children. When they decided to shun her off as well, she went ahead and started gaslighting them into thinking that they were given the lesser share in their own son's property because it was indeed my plan. My grandma believed her for once, but my grandpa always stood by me, and all her hard work was washed away once I talked with both my grandparents, asking them if they wanted the mansion for themselves. Lisa did threaten me after that in a voice call, and I filed for a restraining order on the basis of that, which I very well received. Now, no one other than my immediate family and now Reddit knew about this fight for the inheritance because the matter was going legal soon, but my very smart stepmother Lisa decided to go to the film fraternity and cry wolf about her dead husband, that he was pressuring her to give everything to me after his demise, and now we have plotted the will in an attempt to leave her astray. A lot of people knew my father and what a nice man he was, so they called her bluff and asked her to get checked. Some others questioned her because she was in a good enough job too, so why was she crying about the money? Basically, her plan to garner sympathy backfired pretty nicely, with Jake losing the job he had gotten because of my dad, as the production company didn't wish to associate with someone that's controversial. One bad thing that happened during all this was that local media tabloids picked up the news and had now been bothering me and my grandparents for a comment on this. My dad's lawyer has asked us to stay away from the negative attention as much as we can, but it is getting difficult with each passing day. Update 2. Hey again. It's been a few more days, and unfortunately, things have only gotten more complicated. I didn't expect this, but Lisa has somehow found new ways to escalate the situation. After she lost credibility with the film industry and Jake lost his job, I thought Lisa would back off at least for a while, but of course I was wrong. She's doubled down on her efforts, and this time she's not only targeting me but also going after my friends and other family members, spreading lies and trying to isolate me from anyone who could be a support system. The first incident happened when my dad's lawyer received a letter from Lisa's legal team claiming that I was emotionally unfit to manage the estate. Her argument was that I was still grieving and in no state to handle the complexities of the inheritance. It felt like a low blow, trying to use my grief as a weapon against me, especially considering how hard I've been working to manage everything. What's worse, Lisa also claimed that I had a history of mental health issues and wasn't capable of making rational decisions. The letter even included a few names of family friends she had apparently spoken to who were concerned about my well-being. I have no idea how she convinced these people to support her claims. Some of them were people I hadn't even spoken to in years, but it was clear Lisa was trying to make me seem unstable. I spoke to my dad's lawyer about this latest development, and he reassured me that it was just another desperate attempt by Lisa to get her way. He reminded me that we had evidence of my ability to manage the estate and that her claims wouldn't hold up in court. Still, the fact that she was willing to go this far showed how determined she was to keep pushing. I also found out through mutual acquaintances that Lisa has been reaching out to some of my dad's former business partners, attempting to turn them against me. She's trying to damage my reputation, making it seem like I'm incapable of continuing my dad's work. Fortunately, most of them knew my father well enough to dismiss her claims. The final straw came just yesterday when my car was vandalized. Someone keyed the side of it and left a nasty note on the windshield that said, "Karma's coming for you." I can't prove it was Lisa, but it feels like something she would do, especially considering the timing and everything else going on. I filed a police report, but without evidence, there's not much they can do. Still, it left me rattled. The whole thing is escalating beyond just legal battles and manipulation. It's turning into outright harassment. I've spoken with my lawyer about all of this, and we are preparing to bring up the restraining order again in court, along with a harassment and defamation case. At this point, I'm not just trying to defend myself legally. I'm trying to protect my sanity and peace of mind. Every time I think Lisa has hit rock bottom, she finds a new way to drag me back into the chaos. It feels like I can't escape her grasp no matter how hard I try. I also had a long talk with my grandparents who have been my rock through all of this. They're just as fed up with Lisa as I am, and my grandpa even suggested that I sell the mansion, move somewhere far away, and start fresh. I have to admit, it's tempting. The idea of leaving all this behind and building a new life where Lisa can't touch me sounds like a dream. But at the same time, this was my dad's home. Update 3. It's been a whirlwind of events since my last update, but things have finally reached a turning point. Lisa was officially taken to court, and let's just say things did not go the way she hoped. After months of dragging this mess through the threats of legal battles, the court ruled in my favor, completely shutting down her claims about being deceived into signing the will and alleging that my dad was coerced. It was clear that Lisa and her lawyer were grasping at straws, trying to make a case out of nothing. When the judge handed down the verdict, you could see the shock on Lisa's face. She had spent all this time convinced that she could manipulate the system just like she tried to manipulate everyone else, but it didn't work. What happened next was even more chaotic. After the court hearing, there was an intense confrontation between Lisa and her sons, Jake and James, in the courthouse hallway. I didn't hear everything, but from what I could gather, her sons were furious with her for losing the case. Apparently, they had assumed they would come out of it with a better deal. And when it became clear that Lisa's lies had led them down a dead end, they weren't happy. There was a lot of yelling, and at one point, Jake stormed out of the building, leaving Lisa and James behind. James followed shortly after, and from what I could tell, they weren't exactly on speaking terms anymore. Later that evening, I got an unexpected phone call from Jake. He apologized for how things had turned out and admitted that he and his brother had been blind to what their mother was doing. He even went so far as to say that Lisa had manipulated them for years, making them believe that my dad was the bad guy when in reality, she was the one who caused all the problems in the family. He asked if we could meet up to talk things over, but honestly, I wasn't interested. I had no desire to get involved with them after everything that had happened. I thanked him for the apology but made it clear that I wasn't interested in continuing any kind of relationship with them. I've been through too much at this point, and the last thing I need is to get dragged into more drama with Lisa or her sons. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences. I told Jake that I wished them well, but that it was best if we all moved on separately. Update 4. Hi Redditors. This will be the final update on the whole saga as things have now been sorted out. This update is for the people asking about my grandparents and how life has been for me. It's been a few months since the court case ended, and things have finally settled down. After everything Lisa pulled with the inheritance, the court's ruling was a relief. There was no sympathy left for her, not from me, not from her own sons, and certainly not from the wider public. She had tried to manipulate and lie her way into getting a bigger share of my dad's estate, but in the end, she had nothing but humiliation to show for it. After the court case, I released a short statement through my lawyer. I didn't want to get dragged into more drama, so I kept it simple. I said the will was legitimate and that the court had confirmed my father's wishes. I expressed how hurtful and unnecessary all of Lisa's actions had been, especially after everything my dad did for her and her kids. I made it clear that I had no intention of commenting further on the matter and that I would focus on moving forward with my life. Since then, Lisa's situation has only gotten worse. Her attempts to get sympathy by playing the victim failed spectacularly. The industry my dad had helped her get into has pretty much turned its back on her. No one wants to work with someone who aired out their family's dirty laundry in such a manipulative way. Word got around about the lies she told and how she tried to twist everything to her advantage. The last I heard was that Jake and James cut ties with Lisa completely. They moved out of the condo and haven't spoken to her since. I heard through some mutual acquaintances that they reached out to a few people in the industry for work, but no one wanted to take a chance on them after everything that had happened. It's sad really, but I can't bring myself to feel bad for any of them. They stood by while Lisa made all these false claims and went along with her lies. As for my grandparents, they've been nothing but supportive through all of this. After everything was finally settled, I offered them the mansion as a gift. They were hesitant at first, but eventually they accepted. I know my dad would have loved for them to have the house. It feels like the right thing to do, and honestly, it gives me some peace of mind knowing that the mansion is in good hands. They've already started talking about renovations and updating a few things while keeping the heart of the home intact. It'll be their space now, and I'm happy for them. As for me, I'm moving on to a new chapter. A huge project came up overseas and I'm taking it. It's a big career opportunity, and it couldn't have come at a better time. After everything with Lisa, I realized I needed a fresh start. A change of scenery, new challenges, and a chance to focus on myself and my work away from the toxicity that's plagued me for the past few years. Before I leave, I've been spending a lot of time with my grandparents, helping them settle into the mansion and making sure they're comfortable with everything. They've been my rock through all of this, and knowing they'll be living in the house that my dad loves so much is comforting. It feels like a full circle moment. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Entitled Husband made me cook for his entire family every night while I was pregnant, so I finally snapped and told him to make it yourself, and his parents said I was being childish. So all of this started a couple of weeks ago when I found out that I was 4 weeks pregnant. My husband and I were thrilled, so we hosted a dinner party a couple of days after we found out so that we could make an announcement for our families. But the problem started when people from his family started showing up every other day to visit us, and he would invite them to stay for dinner no matter what. We don't have a housekeeper or a cook. I have to do all the cooking, and that was a problem for me because I don't go on maternity leave until my 3rd trimester, so I'm working right now. I can't come home from work every other day in the evening, entertain guests, and cook not just for myself, but for the people who my husband randomly decides to invite for dinner. It's just not feasible, and yet he continued to do it several times even after I told him that I was not on board with this kind of behavior. We have been together for 4 years and got married about 1.5 years ago, and he has always been very close with his family. That has never been a problem for me, but this is simply ridiculous. His parents, his uncle's family, and his sister's family lived just a couple of blocks away from our house, so it's quite convenient for them to drop in whenever they please. Even before I got pregnant, they would visit us maybe twice or thrice a month, and I would have to cook for them back then as well, since that falls under my share of the chores. But then I did not have a problem with it because their visits were spaced out and not that frequent, so we had our space as well. However, after the pregnancy announcement, they started dropping in more frequently, and instead of spacing the visits out, I would have different members of the family visiting on different days of the week. Like my in-laws would visit us on one day, then a couple of days later his sister and her family would visit, and then his uncle and sometimes even other relatives, which is obviously very tiring for me. So I ended up having to cook for several people more frequently than I was used to. A couple of days ago I just snapped. It was my sister-in-law's family who were visiting me. It was her husband, and their kids, and they were actually going to leave before dinner, but my husband started to insist that they stay. I was not there in the room at the time, but I could hear him insisting that they stay for dinner, and I started to feel really angry. So I thought that I would go to the living room and ask to speak to him in private so I could put an end to this, but when I went out, my husband made the mistake of telling me to serve them dinner at the earliest, and his sister actually started saying what she wanted for dinner. I just couldn't hold back anymore, so I ended up snapping and said, "Make it yourselves." I was really angry, so I did not even bother to wait for them to react, and I just went back inside my room and slammed the door shut. I knew that they had been pretty shocked by my reaction. I had seen that on their faces, but at that moment it had become really hard for me to keep my temper under control since this had started happening way frequently. I was not mad at my husband for being insensitive and entitled, but I was also mad at his family because at least they could have had the good sense of declining to stay for dinner so frequently so that they wouldn't end up overburdening me. A couple of minutes after my outburst, my husband came into our bedroom and confronted me about what had just happened. He seemed quite upset as well, but I was not going to apologize because I had already told him several times that I was not cool with his family showing up every other day because I would end up cooking for all of them, and it was not easy having to do all of that after coming back home from a long day at work. And recently I had also started experiencing morning sickness, but all he seemed to care about was his family and their visits. I told him very firmly that if he had come to the room to argue with me instead of apologizing, then he could just give it a rest because I was really not interested, but he still went on to argue with me and told me that if I had a problem with him inviting his family for dinner every other day, I should have kept it between the two of us instead of insulting his family. But instead, I had not only insulted him but also his sister and her family for no reason, and he told me that I needed to apologize to them. I honestly don't see why I would need to do that because I had initially intended on keeping this between the two of us because it's a personal issue that doesn't really involve his family, but he was the one who kept pushing me by ignoring my concerns. It wasn't like I hadn't spoken to him about this before, but he hadn't paid attention to me, and neither did his family seem to care about me. If they seriously think that it's completely fine to get a pregnant woman to cook for a bunch of people every other day after a long day at work and expect the woman to be fine with it as well, that's their problem and not mine. I had been pushed to the very edge by him and his family, and I was already feeling quite irritable, and in spite of being my husband, he was doing nothing to understand my situation and only cared about himself and his family and how they perceived us. But I don't think my husband understands any of that because as soon as I told him that I was not going to apologize to anybody, he started losing it. He started yelling at me in the room and told me that I was being supremely disrespectful to his family and that it reflected poorly on me but also on him. He told me that I had embarrassed him in front of his sister and his brother-in-law, and for that I needed to apologize because he was sure that his parents were going to find out about this as well. I kept trying to argue with him and explain my side of things, whatever I said in the previous paragraph, but he was just not ready to hear me out. After a while, I got so frustrated and exhausted trying to explain to him why I was so upset that I just gave up. I simply stopped arguing with him and let him continue to talk while I started packing my stuff. When he realized that I had started packing, he told me I couldn't just run away from the situation and expect everything to be fine, but I didn't even care. I just continued to pack and he went away so that he could sit and sulk in the living room. Once I had packed a bag for myself, I decided to get a cab and came here to my parents' house. I left while he was sitting in the living room and he saw me leave, but he did not say anything to try and stop me. A couple of days have passed since then, and he has made no attempt to contact me but has spoken to my parents. That's because when I showed up at my parents' place, they were very confused as to what was going on, and when I explained the situation to them, they told me that they knew that I was right about the way that I reacted, but we still had to deal with the situation and not talking to each other was just not a solution. But I made it very clear to them that I was not going to reach out to him unless he apologized. So yesterday my parents decided to call him up to talk some sense into him, but after the phone call, I found out that my parents had not been able to get him to see my side at all. Instead, he had told him that he was simply not even interested in hearing my side of the story because regardless of what I was going through, the way I had behaved was not okay. He had literally said that there was simply no excuse because apparently he thought that I had acted like a total brat by throwing a tempered tantrum instead of keeping my emotions in check. So the problem right now is that he thinks I should have saved my outburst for later and not behave that way in front of his family even if I had a problem with what was going on, and even threw in some accusations of me trying to isolate him from his family because I don't like them, but I don't think that I did anything wrong, and even his accusations are totally bogus in my opinion. So, IDA for telling my husband to make dinner himself if he wanted to cater to his family? Date 1. Hey, first of all, thank you so much to everybody who commented on my post and had advice for me. Thank you for letting me know that I am NTA. I had seriously begun to doubt myself after whatever my parents told me because honestly on the phone call with my parents, he had sounded pretty convincing and I had started to second-guess myself, but honestly the more that I think about it, the more I realize how entitled he himself has been acting. Both of us have corporate jobs and come back home around the same time. We had started living together about 2 years before we got married, and it always split the chores. It was all mutually decided, and we have always stuck with that system since then. So I really didn't have an issue with cooking. In fact, I really like cooking, and it's one of my favorite pastimes. Cooking for two is easy enough, but when he started getting me to cook for guests so frequently, that's what became annoying. Even before marriage, when his family or sometimes even my family would visit us, I wouldn't have an issue with cooking for all. What I really had a problem with was him treating me like his housemaid while I was pregnant and expecting me to bend over backward for him and his family. If he has a problem with me standing up for myself and snapping on just one occasion after trying to deal with this as civvy as I possibly could, then I think the problem is actually him and not me. And a couple of people in the comments said that his family had no part to play in this, but honestly I don't agree with that. They know I'm pregnant, they know that I'm suffering from morning sickness, they know that I'm working the same hours that he does, and yet they don't have the common sense to decline to have dinner at our house and make me cook for all of them. His mom has been pregnant, so has his sister, and they're all working women. I'm pretty sure that they were aware of the fact that this was not easy for me to cope with every other day, and since my husband was not making it easier for me, the least they could have done was at least try and look out for me since they are so big on family values. On top of that, there were the accusations that he made about me trying to isolate him from his family. If I had never liked them right off the bat, I never would have been cooking for them before we got married or even afterward. I never would have tolerated their presence in my house in the first place and would have started trying to isolate him from his family before I got pregnant and wouldn't have waited until now. Like, that's just common sense. Anyway, it doesn't matter now because I have made up my mind that I'm not going back to him unless he apologizes, and if he doesn't, then I guess I'll have to speak to a lawyer. Update 2. So it has been 1 week since the incident, and also since I left home, and my husband hasn't bothered to contact me yet. Neither have I spoken to him, so I'm guessing I might have to start looking for lawyers. And his parents have convinced me even more that I need to start seeking legal help because I recently had a chat with them over the phone and it was not pleasant. They called me up last evening, and in the beginning, they were trying to be quite supportive. They told me that they had heard about what had happened the other day, and they also knew that we had not been on speaking terms for almost a week, and my mother-in-law told me that she could understand what I was going through. She was trying to sound sincere, and I almost bothered until she said that even though she knew that I wasn't completely wrong, she did think that I overreacted a little bit, and her son was completely right in demanding that I apologize to his family for it. She told me to put myself in his shoes and think about how I would be if he had treated my family like that with such a disrespectful tone, and then said that keeping a family together is hard work and we have to put an effort into a marriage to make it work. So now her advice to me would be to swallow my pride and go back to him and try to make this work because I can't just leave home because of such petty matters, especially when I'm pregnant. That was really annoying for me to hear because I thought that everything that she said to me, she should have been saying to her son. If she really could understand where I was coming from, she would probably also be able to understand that I was right in having an outburst the other day, and because marriage was hard work, would it be too unrealistic for me to expect my husband to put in that hard work, especially when he is wrong? Even though he is aware of the fact that I am pregnant, he hasn't bothered to check up on me, and neither has he spoken to me. It's not just my baby, it's his baby too, and yet it's very obvious that he doesn't seem to care because he thinks that no matter what he does or how he behaves, I should just suck it up and let it go. And that's not just what he thinks. His parents also seem to feel the same way about the situation right now. What I don't understand is why isn't he expected to let it go? After all, he is the one who put me in a difficult spot in spite of me telling him repeatedly not to keep inviting his family over for dinner so frequently because it was exhausting for me to do all the cooking. I tried to explain all of this to my in-laws on the phone because I seriously thought that they were going to understand. But I was wrong because as soon as I started explaining this to them, they started telling me that I was just making up excuses for myself and my behavior. They told me that, at the end of the day, I had to go back to my husband and I couldn't just stay with my parents and expect things to work out on their own because that was really childish of me. They also told me that the only reason they were even getting involved was because even though the situation was my fault, I had already tried to get my parents involved and tried to manipulate him into apologizing to me by having my parents call him. So I had to clarify that I did not make my parents contact them. They had done that on their own, and they had not even asked him to apologize to me. They had just wanted him to speak to me once instead of ignoring me. And this whole sermon that they were subjecting me to, I told them that they should stop wasting their time and say it to their son instead because I'm not interested anymore. I guess my mother-in-law got offended at that because then she started calling me names and stuff, and that's when I hung up because I'm not here for that. So far it was just my husband that I was upset with, but now that his family is slowly getting involved, I guess I'm getting to see their true colors as well. I had already been thinking about speaking to an attorney, but I had been holding myself back because I did not want to go to a place from where I could not come back easily. The only reason I was waiting was because of the baby. I did not want to ruin whatever I had so far because of one fight, But now I see that my husband is willing to do that, and so is his family, and if I'm being frank at this point, I don't see the point of waiting anymore, because so far if I had been staying because of the baby, now I'm going to leave because of the baby as well. I don't want to stay in a situation where I'm not respected and I'm not valued enough, which is exactly what's happening here. So thanks to his family, I think now I'm finally going to be filing for a divorce. As for custody, I'm ready to settle for partial custody, and he can have as much time with his baby as he wants to. I'm not going to hold that against him, but on a personal level, we are done now. Update 3. So it's been 9 days since my last update, and after that phone call from my in-laws, I decided to start looking for divorce attorneys so I could file for divorce within a couple of days. I had started speaking to one guy that a friend of mine knew personally, and we filed for divorce a few days after that, and I guess yesterday my husband was finally served. So he finally bothered to call me up. I don't think he had seen this coming, because he sounded pretty shocked on the phone and asked me if I really wanted to go through with this. I felt really bad saying it because I had really been in love with him for all these years. But now I don't think love is enough. There has to be a certain amount of respect in a relationship as well, and that was clearly not present here, because otherwise he wouldn't have treated me like this, and he definitely wouldn't have made those accusations against me. So I told him that I actually intended on going through with this, because after the conversation that I had with his parents, I really couldn't pretend that everything was fine anymore. They had shown me their true colors, and the biggest reason why I was filing was not even them, it was his behavior. If he had bothered to reach out to me before being served just once, maybe I would have changed my mind, but the way he was treating me, like giving me the cold shoulder, was the biggest punishment of all, as if the silent treatment was going to teach me a lesson. It was just weird. I told him that I was really upset with the changes in his behavior that come ever since I got pregnant, and I was having a hard time reconciling this new personality of his with the guy I used to know. Besides, if he was not even going to talk to me, I did not see the point of staying together with him, and I had waited for long enough before making the move. In fact, even after I had filed for divorce, I was still waiting for him to contact me, but he did not do so. He only bothered to reach out once he realized that I was seriously going to leave. I couldn't help but start getting choked up while I was talking to him, because I got really emotional since it hit me that I was speaking to after a really long time and we were talking about breaking up. It was a huge deal, so I couldn't help it. Unfortunately, he didn't even say anything to try and fix things after I explained all these things to him. There was no apology. He just asked me if I was going to file for full custody as well, and when I said no, he just disconnected the call without even saying bye. So that was that, and I guess this is the end, because I don't see how we can ever bounce back from this, because he has made it very clear that he's not going to apologize no matter what, and you know what? I respect that. At least we both know that it's over. Update 4. Hey, so he is not contesting the divorce, and it's a relief, but it's also really sad for me. I had really never even thought this day would come. But here we are. We have already started the mediation sessions, but that's just for the custody arrangement, since we have always kept our assets and stuff, so that's not going to be a problem. We don't even have any extraordinary demands from each other for the divorce, so that's going to be an easy process. The two of us already have a verbal agreement. We are just going to need to sign off on the legal paperwork, and then we'll be done with it. But about the custody arrangement, that's going to be a bit tricky, because we are getting divorced before the baby is even born, and we know that we can't afford to have our newborn travel back and forth every week just so we can have enough time with our child. Currently, given this scenario, we are considering the idea of allowing our baby to live with me full-time, and my husband can come and go as he pleases. I'm going to be staying with my parents, so he knows where I am at, and this is what we are considering for the first couple of years until our baby needs me a little less. I mean, biologically, our baby is going to need me the most once he's born, so we're just keeping that in mind. It's going to be difficult having him over every other day after the baby is gone, and I'm pretty sure that his family is also going to visit, but that's how we are going to have to deal with it. We have managed to be civil with each other so far during the mediation. We are hoping that we can carry that forward even after the previous bond, because we really don't want any negativity at this point. Update 5. Hi, so quite a few months have passed since my last update, and I'm currently in my third semester, which means that I've gone on maternity leave. A pretty long time has passed since I last spoke to my in-laws or anybody from my husband's family. In fact, the only person that I have mainly been in touch with outside of my own family and friends has been my husband, or my soon-to-be ex-husband to be more precise. I had completely forgotten that I had bad blood with my in-laws after the last conversation that we had. So when they called me a couple of days back, I answered the phone quite cordially and it seemed to surprise them. And a few seconds after, I realized that I had had a fight with them the last time that we spoke. I toned it down as well, but luckily the way that I answered the phone had set the tone of the conversation already, and they were very polite with me throughout the phone call. They didn't exactly apologize, but they did say that they regretted the fact that things were turning out to be like this. They also brought up our last fight and said that they should have dealt with the situation better, which is not exactly an apology, but it's not an apology, so it's something at least. I told him that it was all in the past and tried to make it seem like it was not a big deal because honestly at this point it really wasn't. I mean, my husband and I are literally getting divorced. I don't think compared to that anything regarding them is going to be a big deal for me. They seemed thankful that I was downplaying it and told me that they would really be grateful to me if I allowed them to visit their grandkid after my baby was born given the current circumstances. That was basically their way of saying that regardless of the fight that we had in the past, they still wanted to be an active part of their grandbaby's life, and I obviously said that they were welcome to visit. I don't really have to do any chores here at my parents' house. They have a housekeeper and my mom does most of the cooking, so I don't have to work myself to the bone when we have guests like I had to when I was living with my husband, and that's a major part of the reason why I said that they were free to visit whenever they wanted to after my baby was born. I could have declined and been petty, but I chose not to because now that I'm going to be a mother, I'm trying to be a better person as well. I really don't want to carry forward any negativity into motherhood, and that includes forgiving people, even ones who had gotten on my very last nerve previously. Update 6. Hi guys, so the divorce has been finalized. It happened a couple of weeks back, and a few days ago I gave birth to my son. A lot of people were there, like my family and my husband and his family. We had a bit of a moment when he first got to hold our son, and it was really emotional. Both of us were thrilled and still are, and for some reason it feels like we are back to being the people that we were before everything went wrong. He has been staying with us here in my parents' house so he can spend as much time as he possibly can with a baby. We don't stay in the same room though. He's been staying in the guest room. He had been here for a couple of days before the predicted due date because he did not want to miss even a second of the birth. I mean, it's really hard for me not to get sentimental about all of these things because the divorce is still fresh and I haven't exactly moved on from him yet. It became even more difficult for me when after the birth that night, he was helping me out and stuff and he finally apologized for everything. He told me that he was really sorry that he had to put me through all of this. He hadn't realized how difficult it had become for me, and by the time he did have that realization, it was way too late. I had already filed for a divorce and he had accepted it and told me that it had probably been the worst decision of his life not to fight for me. It got me really emotional and I had to fight myself really hard, so I did not end up completely sobbing and stuff in front of him. I mean, I don't really hope that we can repair our relationship so quickly and go back to being the way that we used to be. That's definitely not going to happen anytime soon, and right now I just want to focus on being a mother. But who knows? This is definitely a start. Before this, he wasn't even willing to acknowledge the fact that he had messed up. But now at least he's willing to admit that he did not treat me as well as he should have. Anyway, all I'm saying is that if there is even the slightest chance that we can make it work even after everything that has happened, I would like to take that chance. He has been really great so far, and if at some point we loved each other and we wanted to make it work, I don't see why we can't go back to that point again, especially now since our baby is here. I want to give our son the chance to have a normal family life, so who knows, maybe we might put our differences aside. But for now, I'm just happy to be a mother. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Parents cut me off from marrying a poor guy, but now they're begging me to save my sister from her rich, gambling boyfriend who's draining their money. My parents provided my sister and me with a very comfortable life growing up. They spared no expense when it came to our education and overall upbringing, ensuring that we had everything we needed and more. This generous support is something for which I will always be deeply grateful. I witnessed many of my friends facing significant challenges at home while we were growing up, struggling to secure even the basic necessities. It was a stark contrast to my own experience, where such struggles were absent. Our household was one of abundance, where material needs were effortlessly met. Despite the wealth and comfort, I always tried to remain grounded. I was acutely aware of the privileges that our parents' hard work and success afforded us. This awareness fostered a sense of gratitude within me. I never viewed our financial status as a reason to feel superior to others. Instead, I saw it as a fortunate circumstance that came with a responsibility to remain humble and empathetic towards others. I tried to take care of my friends as much as I possibly could. For example, if one of my friends didn't have any lunch money for the day, I would offer them my lunch or give them some of my pocket money so they could buy something from the cafeteria and eat what they preferred. It was important to me that my friends never felt left out or deprived. Similarly, if a friend liked a particular lipstick brand but couldn't afford it, I would try to save up my own money so I could buy it for them as a birthday gift. It brought me joy to see their faces light up when they received something they had wanted but couldn't have. These small gestures were my way of showing appreciation for my friends and trying to share the good fortune I had been blessed with. It was never about flaunting wealth, but about using it in a way that could make a positive difference in the lives of those I cared about. My sister, Ruth, however, took a different path. She often let our family's wealth shape her interactions with others, developing a sense of superiority because of it. This difference in our perspectives created a noticeable divide in how we related to our peers and approached life. While I valued humility and gratitude, my sister seemed to embrace the advantages of our affluent upbringing in a way that often made her appear entitled. While Ruth and I did have the same set of parents and received the same material comforts, there was a significant difference in our experiences growing up. When I was born, my parents were still in the early stages of their business, working hard to establish themselves and onboard new clients. Those initial years were a time of struggle and perseverance, and I saw firsthand the effort and sacrifices they made to build a stable life for us. By the time Ruth was born, the business had flourished and our family was enjoying the fruits of my parents' labor. As a result, Ruth grew up in a different environment, one of financial security and abundance. She never witnessed the lean years or the hard work that went into creating the comfortable life we enjoyed. To her, it seemed as though our parents had always been successful and affluent. I guess this is also why we had such a different outlook towards life. When I would share stories about the modest house I grew up in and the challenges our parents faced in their business initially, Ruth would often react with disbelief. She would scrunch up her nose and dismiss my accounts as impossible, unable to reconcile the idea of our parents ever being anything less than well off. To her, the notion of our parents having a period of struggle was inconceivable, and she would ask me to not recount this to anyone in school since she did not want to admit to anyone that our family ever struggled in any way. I always hoped that Ruth's naivety and sense of entitlement would fade as she grew older, expecting that maturity and life experiences would eventually make her more understanding and grounded. Unfortunately, that change never came. Despite the passing years, Ruth remained steadfast in her beliefs, always taking for granted the privileges we were afforded. As you can imagine, this disagreement in our thinking was what would cause multiple fights between us. For instance, if one of our friends wore clothes from a less expensive brand, Ruth wouldn't hesitate to point it out in a condescending manner. She might say something like, "Oh, I didn't know they still made those. I only wear designer labels," making our friend feel self-conscious and inferior. Similarly, during school events or parties, Ruth would go out of her way to flaunt her latest gadgets or expensive accessories. She would casually mention how her parents had just bought her the newest smartphone or designer handbag, ensuring everyone knew about her high-end possessions. This behavior of hers always made me uncomfortable, and if I ever asked her to be humble or to not say certain things in front of others, she would argue that she was just speaking the truth and that it wasn't her fault that people were poor at school. This would infuriate me, as I couldn't stand watching her belittle others and misuse the advantages we had. If you're wondering whether our parents supported Ruth's childish behavior towards others, I hate to admit it, but they did. My mother, in particular, was very much like Ruth in her attitude. Apparently, my maternal grandparents used to be quite wealthy until they lost a significant portion of their money due to bad investments. This financial setback forced them to give up their large, opulent house and move into a smaller one, a change my mother absolutely detested. She would often express her dissatisfaction to her parents, lamenting how she wished she had never been born to them or wishing they could provide a better lifestyle. This was largely because my mother had many wealthy friends and felt inferior in comparison. It's important to note that despite the financial loss, my maternal grandparents were still able to afford a good life. It just wasn't the same lavish existence they once had. My mom has always had a lot of resentment towards her parents because of this. Hence, when Dad's business started going well and they shifted to a wealthy neighborhood, my mom finally felt at home. She loved the fact that people looked at us differently and we could now go for extravagant vacations without worrying about the money. Her sense of privilege and entitlement also rubbed off on Ruth, who was exactly like her. She always seemed to support Ruth's sense of superiority, perhaps because she saw in Ruth a reflection of her own past frustrations and desires. Unfortunately, this support only reinforced Ruth's behavior towards others, making it even more challenging for her to develop a grounded perspective on life and the privileges we enjoyed. When I first started dating, my parents had different pieces of advice to offer. My dad wanted me to find a good, hardworking, and dependable guy to marry. He emphasized the importance of character, integrity, and reliability in a partner. My mom, on the other hand, had a very different perspective. She insisted that I should marry into a wealthy family so that I could enjoy a lavish lifestyle and she could gain access to wealthier friends within her social circle. I felt bad that she was essentially using me to climb an imaginary social ladder, valuing status and wealth over genuine connection and personal happiness. This pressure made my early dating experiences quite challenging. When I first started dating, my mom would often interfere and tell me how the guy wasn't good enough for me and kind of pressured me to break up with him. This resulted in a few fights, after which my dad had a talk with my mother and she decided to keep her mouth shut about my dating life. However, I also quickly realized over the years that many men in the real world were more interested in my family's wealth than in who I was as a person. They saw me as a ticket to a comfortable and affluent life rather than appreciating me for my personality, values, or aspirations. This realization was disheartening and made it difficult for me to find someone who was genuinely honest and kind, someone who could emotionally support me and be my pillar of strength. I often found myself questioning the motives of those who showed interest in me, making it hard to trust and form meaningful connections. This is why when I first met Robert, I wasn't that excited initially. I assumed he, like every other guy before him, would light up at the mention of my family's wealth and try to get me to talk about my dad's assets. However, Robert turned out to be different. He didn't give 2 cents about what my dad had or the kind of lifestyle I grew up in. Instead, Robert asked me the important questions. He wanted to know how I felt growing up with my family. He was genuinely curious about whether my family looked after me or if they were too busy with their own schedules. He even asked if I felt lonely and miserable growing up. These questions showed me that he was interested in me as a person, not as an extension of my family's wealth. Robert's focus on my feelings and experiences rather than my family's financial status was refreshing and comforting. It was the first time someone had taken the time to understand my personal history and emotions rather than just my family's material wealth. This approach made me realize that Robert saw me for who I truly was, and it marked the beginning of a meaningful connection between us. Unlike me, Robert had a humble upbringing, yet he never made me feel like I was just a money bag to him. He would take me out on dates to small cafes and treat me like a queen. I loved how he was so confident in who he was and never felt inferior or put me down. Unlike many men I had encountered in the past, Robert's lack of a big ego and his genuine appreciation for life stood out to me. He wasn't trying to impress me with grand gestures or extravagant outings. Instead, he focused on creating meaningful experiences and showing me genuine care and affection. This authenticity made me feel valued and cherished in a way I hadn't felt before. Robert's ability to see and appreciate the simple joys in life without feeling the need to compete or prove himself created a sense of stability and comfort in our relationship. This is why when I introduced Robert to my family, I was quite nervous since I was serious about him and wanted to see if he could fit in with my family. I was particularly worried about how my mother and sister would react, given their tendency to put others down. During lunch, my dad engaged Robert in a conversation about his business and listened attentively as Robert talked about his job. Robert was quite frank about his humble upbringing and expressed gratitude for where he was now. My dad appreciated Robert's honesty and humility, but I could see the disdain in my mother's face throughout lunch. She was utterly disappointed in me and after lunch refused to talk to me directly, fuming that I had been dating someone like Robert. My sister, much like my mother, kept making subtle comments and jokes about Robert's outfit, hairstyle, and upbringing. These remarks irritated me, and I repeatedly told her to stop. It was disheartening to see them judge Robert based on superficial aspects rather than his character and the way he treated me. Despite their negativity, Robert remained polite and composed, which only reinforced my feelings for him and highlighted the stark contrast between his genuine kindness and my family's superficial judgments. After lunch, my dad shared his thoughts with me privately. While he acknowledged that Robert seemed like a wonderful guy, he expressed concerns that Robert might not be able to provide me with the same lifestyle I was brought up with. My dad was worried about my future comfort and well-being, fearing that I might have to compromise on the material aspects of life I was accustomed to. I understood his concerns but felt it was important to explain how Robert made me feel truly seen and heard. I told my dad that I was willing to compromise on lifestyle if necessary because Robert and I were compatible in many other, more meaningful ways. Robert's kindness, understanding, and the way he valued our relationship meant more to me than just maintaining a luxurious lifestyle to show off in front of others. My dad appreciated how hardworking Robert was and recognized the genuine connection we shared. It was a relief to have at least one parent start to see what I saw in Robert, giving me hope for a future where my family could accept and support our relationship. However, my mother and sister made their disapproval of Robert abundantly clear. They criticized everything about him and insisted that he wasn't a good fit for our family. My sister went so far as to stalk his entire family on social media, showing me pictures of their lifestyle and highlighting how terrible it was compared to ours. Just to give more context, Robert was doing quite well in his sales job when he met me and lived in a very good neighborhood in his own apartment. He had always been open and honest with me about his background and his family's situation, so I was not surprised by any information that Ruth threw at me. I tried to explain to my sister that she had no right to put down Robert's family since he had no way to choose which family he was born into. I emphasized that Robert had worked incredibly hard throughout his life to achieve his current status and deserved to be appreciated for his hard work. I told my sister that while I understood Robert didn't have the same kind of materialistic wealth we were used to, his heart was immense and he was genuinely kind-hearted. Robert was the kind of person who would willingly give up his own plate of food if it meant I could eat. His selflessness and dedication to our relationship were qualities that I deeply valued. Despite the negative opinions from my mother and sister, I knew Robert's character and the genuine love and respect he showed me were what mattered most. I also shared this perspective with my mom since she kept voicing unnecessary concerns about my relationship with Robert. I emphasized to her that I would rather work hard and build a future with someone like Robert who truly valued and appreciated me than marry into a wealthier family where I might never be valued for who I am. Despite my attempts to explain my feelings, my mother and sister didn't respect my decision and continued to insist that I should break up with Robert as soon as possible and find a more eligible bachelor. Several times, they tried to set me up with other more privileged men, believing that a wealthier match would be more suitable for our family. At times, they went to great lengths to trick me into going on dates with other guys. They would call me to meet up for a movie or at the mall only for them to not show up, and then would suddenly spring me with the news that they had set up a date for me. They would pressure me into going on dates with these men they had supposedly arranged. If I ever tried to cancel my dates, they would tell me how it would reflect poorly on them and that people would talk about our family. This manipulation left me feeling uncomfortable and frustrated as I had to awkwardly turn down these poor men during our dates and explain that I was already in a relationship with my partner, Robert. As you can imagine, these experiences led to more frequent arguments with my mother and Ruth. I tried to make them understand how their actions were crossing my boundaries and causing me distress, but they never seemed to grasp the extent of my frustration. Their lack of respect for my choices and feelings only deepened the conflict between us. This is why when Robert finally proposed to me after 3 years of dating, I was already prepared for my mother's harsh reaction. She openly expressed her disappointment, accusing me of embarrassing the family by choosing to associate with someone who was beneath us. Her words felt like a blow to my happiness as she seemed unable to see beyond her own materialistic concerns. Ruth, too, was upset. She refused to pick up my calls or offer any congratulations for my engagement, further adding to the tension between us. Her refusal to acknowledge this significant moment in my life was deeply hurtful, reflecting her ongoing disapproval. My dad, in contrast, took a more neutral stance. While he seemed genuinely happy for me, he also expressed some doubts. He urged me to consider a prenuptial agreement before marriage, citing various concerns about how Robert might potentially steal money from us. I was quite sad by my family's reaction to such a happy occasion in my life. It bothered me immensely how they were always so selfish and focused on protecting themselves and their wealth rather than on my feelings and happiness in my life. However, despite the mixed reactions from my family, I remained committed to my decision to marry Robert. When it came time to plan our wedding, Robert and I decided we wanted to handle the expenses ourselves. We were determined not to ask for any financial support from our parents. All I hoped for was that my family would be present at the wedding and celebrate this joyous occasion with us without any complaints. However, just a day before the wedding, my parents requested a one-on-one meeting with me. During this meeting, my mother took the lead in expressing her dissatisfaction, telling me that the wedding was a huge mistake. My mother kept saying how Robert just didn't match our lifestyle and how she felt ashamed of being associated with someone who was just a useless sales guy. She said her friends' daughters were marrying into wealthier families, while I was apparently downgrading myself by being associated with this man. My mother even commented about how this was why Ruth's always been her favorite child since she understood and shared her perspective, which was extremely hurtful for me to hear. In the back of my head, I always knew my parents didn't love me as much as they loved Ruth, but she had never been so outright open about her feelings until that day. My dad also kept saying how worried he was that I was marrying without a prenup and went on to threaten me that he would not ever give me any money in the future or leave me with any properties if I didn't get a prenup before getting married. He kept saying how he didn't work so hard for another man to steal it away from us. I tried to reassure my parents, explaining that Robert genuinely loved me and that while he would mind signing a prenup if I asked, doing so would be unfair to him. I knew Robert well enough to be confident that he would never take a penny from me regardless of what happened. Despite my efforts to convey this, my parents' worries and judgments persisted, and they refused to back down. As a last resort, my mother issued an ultimatum, threatening that if I didn't heed their concerns, she and my dad would not attend the wedding. She also said that my dad would not walk me down the aisle. I was stunned by her threats and looked at my dad hoping he might counter her stance. Instead, he nodded in agreement with my mom, telling me that I was walking on clouds and needed to understand their perspective as well. He expressed that he would prefer to cut me off now rather than risk being financially exploited by Robert later during my divorce. Their reactions were deeply hurtful and disheartening. I felt overwhelmed by the gravity of their threats and their refusal to support what was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life. Their unwillingness to accept my choice and their focus on potential financial pitfalls rather than my happiness left me in tears. Thus, I reached a breaking point. I decided that I would rather live a life without my unsupportive parents than a life without Robert. My love for Robert and the life we were building together were far more important to me than their acceptance. I uninvited my parents from the wedding and walked out of their house, promising to never come back. Looking back, I'm glad I made the decision. Even 5 years later, Robert and I are happily married, and he has never made me feel that choosing him was a mistake. He continues to be the love of my life, and our relationship has only grown stronger since we got married. Robert has advanced in his career, securing a much higher-paying job, and we are now able to afford many things that we are grateful for. We both dedicate our weekends to various charity drives and donate money to underprivileged children whenever we can. These activities help keep us focused on what truly matters and bring a sense of purpose to our lives. In the past 5 years, my parents and I haven't spoken a word. The rift between us remained unhealed, and their continued disapproval created an insurmountable barrier. As for Ruth, our relationship was never strong to begin with, so it's not surprising that she has also chosen not to speak to me. Despite the lack of communication with my family, I have found solace and fulfillment in the life Robert and I have built together. This is why when my mother called me out of the blue yesterday, I was quite taken aback. Initially, I ignored her calls, unsure of what to make of them given the long period of silence and the strained nature of our relationship. I was reluctant to engage. However, a swirl of thoughts raced through my mind. Perhaps there was a medical emergency or something had happened to my dad. So I decided to answer when she called me for the third time. The conversation began in an awkward silence. Neither of us knew quite how to bridge the gap that had grown over the years. My mother eventually broke the silence with small talk, asking if I was doing well. I didn't want to be outright rude, so I answered her question politely, but I also wanted to address the reason for her unexpected call. I asked her directly why she had reached out after all these years of estrangement. This was when my mother slowly admitted that she and Dad had been keeping tabs on me and Robert over the years. She revealed that they were pleased to see how well we were doing despite their earlier disapproval. It seemed they had been watching from a distance and were satisfied with our progress. However, the real reason for her call became clear when she explained that she believed I was the only person she could turn to help out with a situation regarding my sister Ruth. According to my mother, Ruth was involved with a wealthy man who had serious issues, including a drinking problem and a gambling addiction that had led to a lot of debt. My parents had tried various approaches to break them up, but Ruth had refused to listen to them. She was determined to stay with this man because she believed he could provide her with the life she had always dreamed of. However, the situation had deteriorated further. The man Ruth was involved with had started to ask my dad for money to pay off his debts. Despite his reluctance, Dad had helped out with a few thousand just because he wanted to make Ruth happy. Yet the man had kept pressing our parents for more money, and they had now reached their breaking point. My mother insisted that they needed me to step up as the oldest sibling and have a serious talk with Ruth about her rebellious actions for dating such a man. She argued that since Robert and I had managed to turn our lives around over the years, my sister needed to learn from my example. My mother urged that I was their last hope and told me that I needed to keep our differences aside and help my younger sister out in whatever way I could. My mother's revelation was startling. At this point, I realized my parents were looking to me not just for support, but for a resolution to Ruth's ongoing issues. And maybe my mother thought I could potentially help out by paying off the guy's debts. So I asked my mother to stop talking and reminded her that she needed to stop using terms like older sister and family when speaking to me. I pointed out that she, Dad, and Ruth had all refused to communicate with me for years. It felt disingenuous for her to suddenly invoke these familial roles when they had been so distant and unsupportive. I wanted her to first acknowledge the long-standing issues between us and the emotional distance that had been created before expecting me to step in and resolve their problems with Ruth. However, my mom refused to apologize and told me that she and Dad did what they thought was right at the time and that I needed to let the past go. Update 1. Wow, when I posted this, I had no idea that so many people would support my decision. I am genuinely taken aback that I was not wrong to think of not helping out my parents even though they seemed desperate. I do agree that I deserve to get a proper apology from them after all these years and that they have no right to ask for my help just because they have no one else to turn to. Update 2. It turns out I received a call from Dad today, just 2 days after Mom reached out to me. He started by apologizing to me for everything and told me how blinded he was to not see and appreciate Robert for who he was. Dad then explained the various problems he's been facing in his business since Ruth became involved with her boyfriend. Apparently, the man has a very bad reputation, and understandably, potential investors and clients are now hesitant to be associated with my dad due to this connection. Dad admitted that he had lost a significant amount of money trying to pay off Ruth's boyfriend's gambling debts, but the man just never learned his lesson. He expressed that given the severity of the situation, he and Mom believed I was their only remaining option. They hoped I could help Ruth see the consequences of her actions and persuade her to reconsider her relationship with someone who had already caused so much trouble. This is when I suggested to Dad that he needed to do exactly what he had done to me 5 years ago. I told him that since no one could force Ruth to see the error of her ways because she was a grown adult woman, he needed to stop supporting her lifestyle with her boyfriend and should cut her off just as he had done with me. Dad remained quiet as I continued, reminding him that he had no hesitation in cutting me off even though it turned out he was wrong about Robert. I told him that if he had been willing to do that to me, he should have no problem applying the same approach to Ruth given her current situation. I made it clear that aside from this piece of advice, I owed nothing to them and that their problems with Ruth were not my responsibility to solve. I have no idea if my dad will actually listen to me or not, but he didn't argue with me any further. Update 3. A quick update. After my phone call with Dad, my mom called me in a fit of anger. She was outraged, calling it distasteful for me to suggest that Dad cut off Ruth and blamed me for the fact that Dad was even considering it. She yelled that I was supposed to talk sense into Ruth, not convince Dad to abandon her. I simply laughed and told her she needed to stop calling me and expecting me to help her precious daughter when she had no problem abandoning me during my wedding. I reminded her that I had only suggested an idea to Dad and ultimately it was his decision to make. I reiterated that their problems with Ruth were not my concern. Since that conversation, I have blocked both of my parents from my phone. The recent interactions have taken a toll on my mental health, and I no longer want to be involved with my family in any way. Honestly, I don't care what happens to Ruth. I hope this is a lesson for my parents for always having treated me differently. I am quite happy with Robert currently and want to focus on the life we share. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Best friend kicked me out because his girlfriend of 7 months told him to, but I came back after realizing my rights as a tenant. Now he wants to break up with her, so I, 21F, have been friends with 21M, Mike, fake name, for 16 years. We became friends officially in kindergarten, but our parents were college friends. I honestly can't even call him a best friend. He's like a sibling, and in a way we were raised as siblings. Group family holidays, sleepovers, family vacations on both sides. At one point, we even all lived together for a year. I'm saying this because I know some people will ask. No, there's been no crushes or feelings on either side at all. We haven't kissed, confessed feelings, or had crushes. It's been strictly sibling-like. And I'm saying that now because of what Mike's girlfriend has been saying. Me and Mike share an apartment together near campus, as we both attend college together. Around 7 months ago, Mike met his girlfriend, 21F April, fake name. Now, I thought we got along okay. I've only met her a couple of times because she has anxiety, but I had no problem at all with her until recently, besides some minor things. Sometimes she would interject when Mike would call me a sister. It wasn't always, but normally like, well, technically you aren't siblings, which is 100% true, but it's how we viewed each other since we were kids. So almost a month ago, my class got canceled, so I came home early. I walk in and ride on the couch as Mike and April having sex. I scream, run to my room, and frantically yell at Mike via text. He apologized, said he thought I would be gone longer. I made him clean the couch, all good, right? No. April, for some reason, got upset and felt that her words, I did that on purpose, despite it never happening before, and that it was inappropriate of me to walk in on them again. This was in the living room, absolutely disgusting in my opinion, but I moved on because it's not a big deal, embarrassing, but nothing crazy. Anyway, Mike has been stressed recently because April had been asking him to distance from me. I thought she was just embarrassed, which I'd understand, so I tried being friendly and apologized. Well, last weekend, Mike sat me down and basically said that I had to move out because his girlfriend was upset with me living with him. I was floored. I got so upset. I don't think I've yelled and cried that much in my life. The basics are that he doesn't want me to, but he's pressured from his girlfriend, and he really loves her, so he wants to make her happy. He thinks that this shouldn't change our friendship and that he's just putting some distance between us. See, if he had asked me to move out, I'd understand, okay, yeah, maybe you want to take your relationship to the next level, okay. But it was a demand, and not only that, he wanted to put space between our friendship. It was so hurtful. I've known him for 16 years, and that's it? I'm gone for someone he's known for 7 months? I said he was choosing a short relationship over his sister, and that I don't want him to contact me if he's going to be like that. He said I was overreacting, but I called my parents and got them to pick me up. Literally, thank God they don't live far away, but like, what if they did? What did he expect me to do? Just sleep outside or something? Anyway, I obviously had to tell my parents what was going on, given they had to pick me up, and I was an emotional mess. I told them everything, which caused a bit of an argument when they went to pick up some of my things the next day. They called Mike's parents and kind of chewed them out a little, and from my understanding, they called Mike and did the same. Mike messaged me to say that he was upset I couldn't be civil and that he feels like I am throwing away a friendship. I blocked him shortly after. I've taken some time off classes, but I'm so hurt and upset. It hurts that he could just throw me away so easily. I don't think I did anything wrong telling my parents, but I think it may have crossed a line when they phoned Mike's parents. Like I said previously, our parents are really close, and it's kind of messed with their friendship now. His parents have been really kind and apologetic, even though it's not their fault, and a part of me feels like I made this into a bigger mess. Sorry if it's a bit chaotic. I'm on phone and still a bit emotional. Also, I know I didn't have to leave. Me and Mike both pay an equal amount of rent for the apartment, but I didn't want to stay in a place that I wasn't wanted. It would have just made it difficult, and worst case scenario, he'd leave, which would have put a financial strain on me. Edit. I read you all loud and clear. Thank you for waking my ass up. I've talked to my landlord. She said that she was uncomfortable with April moving in because she doesn't know her. I understood, so I'm moving my ass back tomorrow. I unblocked Mike and informed him. I explained that until our landlord says otherwise, I'm staying. Either he can leave and get a new place and keep paying the rent, or we can end our agreement together, and if our landlord agrees, they can start one. He replied, okay, we can talk about it tomorrow. So we see. Thank you all so much for getting me up and going. I really had no idea how serious this situation could be until you all let me know how stupid I was being. I don't care if it's uncomfortable. I'm not wasting my money. Comments. Oop replying to a commenter. If she is approved and may he hear this is insane to me. Yeah, it was disgusting. I screamed when I saw it because it was gross, not because they were having sex. I'm 21 years old. It's gross because he's like a brother on the couch I paid for in front of me. It was nasty to see. I don't care what was going on. Take it to the bedroom. And again, they've been dating for 7 months. This isn't the first time we obviously have a system, one that he didn't abide by. I'm sorry, but acting like I'm weird for being upset that they were in our public space is so weird to me. I sit in that space. I use it too. No reason they couldn't take it to the bedroom. If they can't live with spontaneous sex, then boo-hoo, they can move out, easy and simple solution. I don't understand why I have to be uncomfortable so that they can be happy. I'm sorry, I appreciate all comments made because it gives me a better insight, but this one is so weird to me. I'm a problem because I don't want them on my furniture? Oh, okay. Update July 1st, 2024. Thank you all for the amazing advice. I was hesitant to even upload here, but I'm really glad I did. I honestly can't believe how naive I was, and you all probably saved me a lot of trouble. So on to the update. I came back to the apartment yesterday morning. I let Mike know beforehand and asked if April not be there so we could talk alone. Mike was quite emotional and apologetic, which surprised me a little. I found out a bit more information that makes a bit more sense now. Mike has been under a lot of pressure for a while now to drop me. He thought that me moving out and distancing himself would be enough to appease April while still keeping our friendship. Obviously, he didn't expect me to take it the way I did, but what other way would I take it? And he didn't expect me to leave that day. I mean, yeah, he didn't specifically say, pack your and leave now, but saying you need to leave and saying that he wanted distance over our 16-year relationship out of nowhere makes me feel like I couldn't have just gone to bed normally, you know? I've read everyone's comment so many times. I've drilled it into my head. So as much as it hurts, I'm keeping my distance from Mike at the moment. The fact that he never once told me about April wanting him to not talk to me, and he didn't even consider my circumstances before asking me to leave, where else could I go? It's not a definite end of our friendship, but I'm not feeling pretty positive. Anyway, he's apologized. He said that he missed me while I was gone, and that he knew he up after he told me to leave, but that he just wanted to make April happy since he could see a future with her. April has lost her, to put it mildly, and she threw up a storm in the lobby of our apartment last night. Mike refused to let her in, which understandably made her lose her even more. Tons of colorful words thrown about on both ends. I'm a home racer, a horror, which is laughable anyway. She's not to be allowed into our apartment now, period, at least until he decides on their relationship. Mike has been pretty upset today. He wants space from April because he said that he wants to end the relationship, very surprising. But I'm cautiously optimistic since I'm not sure how willing he'll be. We've had a bit of a heart-to-heart. Regardless of how upset and hurt I am, he's my brother. I'm trying to be like I wanted to when I moved back in, but it's so hard when he's all mopey and sad. I told him that if he continues seeing her, I'm putting some distance between us respectfully to avoid this happening again. He said he doesn't want that. I talked with my landlord before moving back. She didn't want April moving in as she doesn't know her. She was a bit upset that this situation was happening as she didn't want drama, which I understand. I've moved back, and I've discussed the lease with Mike. We renew in September, or that was the plan, so now we're deciding on how to go ahead. I feel like it'll be best for me to get my own place. Maybe this was long overdue, to be honest. Although Mike is saying that he wants us to continue being roommates next year, so we're discussing this at the moment. It's not really a super dramatic update, but at least the leasing issue has been solved. I'm not being kicked out or leaving until our lease is done. April isn't coming over for the foreseeable future. Only issue right now is my relationship with Mike. It's very awkward in the apartment. You can tell something's changed. He's been trying to be friendly like we were before all of this, and he's apologized a lot, which I appreciate, but I'm finding it a bit difficult to move on and go back to normal. I'm not being or mean, just slightly distant. Anyway, that's the update. I really want to thank you all again for making me realize how serious this could be. I honestly had no idea that you couldn't just switch who was renting, which is so embarrassing. Also, to that one woman in my DMs and comments spam messaging me, you're insane. I don't know who hurt you, but get a life, please. This isn't even that serious. Comments. Chris 65. Mike needs to learn to drop anyone who tries to come between him and a healthy familial relationship. As a mom, I like you two being roommates because you're less likely to have trouble with aggressive men. I'm a girl mom and think of these things. For Mike, it's a great way to judge is the woman he is dating is psycho. Oop. Honestly, that was one of the main reasons why we moved in together when we started college. Mike and my family was worried about me having a place to myself, and Mike's parents wanted me to keep an eye on him. Roadkill for snacks. Did Mike break down and explain how he changed from seeing a future with her to wants to end the relationship? Understanding his reasoning process may help to rebuild trust and demonstrate maturing of Mike. Was it the tantrum damage? Damage to the friendship? Damage to the relationship with his parents and your parents? If he was older and wiser, I think the insecurity of April, the inability to communicate, negotiate, and resolve conflict would be relationship red flags. Oop. He said that it was the few days that I was gone and had him blocked that it put into perspective how much he missed me and that he imagined the next 30 years of his life like this. I'm not entirely sure. Even I was surprised by the switch up because even I thought that there would be drama between us when I came back. Why Oop and Mike aren't together? Because me and Mike don't view each other like that. It's really just that simple. I see a lot of people asking the same thing. At the very least, he's like a step sibling, at most a brother to me. Nothing has happened between either of us, and it never will. It's so confusing why some people aren't getting that. No, as far as I know it hasn't, although there's only been 2 other relationships before April. They both ended on pretty good terms and none of them had issues with me. I can maybe see our relationship being taken the wrong way as we are affectionate, but again, siblings, if I had a brother or sister, it's the same type of affection I'd show them. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Girl asked me to spot her in gym, but I said no because she was filming. Turns out she's been calling me her gym crush online for months and my wife found out. Hello everyone. I, 41M, go to the gym early morning around 5:30 a.m. There are generally very few people that come to the gym at that time. There is a girl, early 20s, that also comes to the gym at the same time. We always say hello to each other and have a small talk between our sets. She comes in early because the gym is empty and she likes to record herself working out as she wants to be a fitness influencer or something. She seems dedicated, and we know each other for at least a year. Today morning, as I was working out, she came to me and asked for help. She was very excited and told me that she wanted to go for a PR on barbell squat. She asked me if I could spot her as she was not confident if she would be able to do it. I said okay, as this is not the most uncommon thing for people who are unfamiliar. This is an exercise where you carry a barbell with weights on your back and perform a squat. The spotter has to stand behind the person and support the person in case they fail to get up. As she was getting ready, I saw her phone in the corner and asked her if I can be off camera or if she can stop recording. She said she really wanted to record herself doing it and I will look good on camera. I told her that I really do not want to be on camera as my wife or coworkers may watch the video she posted online and may not look good for me. Another reason that I did not tell her was that she was wearing a very revealing outfit, small sports bra and tight shorts, and I really did not feel comfortable being recorded standing behind her. She promised me that she will record it for herself and not post the video. However, I just did not want to be recorded. I told her that I really feel uncomfortable, and if she waits for 30 minutes, one of the trainers may be able to help her. She became really upset and asked me why I am making the situation weird. She accused me of sexualizing her. She asked me if she was a man, would I have done it? I felt she had a point, as I have done it for other people. I told her that I would be okay doing it, but I just don't want to be recorded doing it. She again went on a rant about me body shaming her and me being uncomfortable with her perfectly fine outfit. I felt bad that I upset her, as she was just trying to work out. I have also asked people to spot me in past and people always helped. However, I just did not want to be recorded. Am I the odd or refused to spot her because she was recording it? I don't want her to feel that it was because of her clothes or because she is a girl. However, as a married man, I need to observe some boundaries and really don't want to be recorded in that way with a girl half my age. I am also worried that she recorded our whole conversation and may post it online. I do not know what I should do in this situation, and I'm a bit worried. Update 1 July 19, 2024. I had posted on a different forum 3 weeks ago about me refusing to help a girl in the gym for spotting her barbell squat because she was recording us. I did not think it will blow up so much that my wife got this story. What happened after was pretty unexpected in my life is a bit absurd right now. I was worried that she would post our conversation about me refusing her help online and show me as the bad guy. I told my wife about the conversation, and she said that she has seen posts where young girls do add nasty voiceovers and make men my age look like creeps or views. My wife told me that I should just complain to the gym management about her for recording me without my consent, just to get ahead of things. When I went to the gym next week, I saw her again. I tried to keep my distance, but she kept on smiling at me. As I finished my sets, she came to me and asked me if we could talk. She wanted to apologize for her behavior from the previous day and how it was wrong of her to assume that I would be okay with her recording me. It was a pleasant surprise, as I was not expecting that. I told her that it was okay, and I just don't like to be recorded in general. She followed me outside and continued the conversation. She asked me how long I've been working out and I could advise her on her form. I told her that there are some really good personal trainers in the gym I could recommend to her, but she told me that she is unemployed and cannot afford them. She told me she will buy me a coffee if I can give her some pointers. At this point, I felt I was just being rude and told her sure, and we went to a new nearby coffee shop. Her name is Haley. She graduated last year, moved back to her mom's house, and is looking for a job. She was very chubby last year and wants to look like the fitness models and is trying hard to get in shape. We had a nice conversation, and I was able to help her with some of her questions. She already knew my name and asked me if my wife would be okay if she follows me on Instagram. I told her that the main purpose of that account is for my wife to spy on my friends' lives, so I generally don't use it. She asked me if I use Snapchat, and I had to remind her that I'm twice her age. This is where it got crazy. When I came home, I told my wife about what happened. My wife loves her reels and wanted to see if she ever posted the video from previous week. I only knew that her first name was Haley and how she looked and told my wife about it. When I came back from work in the evening, my wife was already home and sitting on the sofa. She was grinning ear to ear and told me to immediately sit next to her. Apparently, this girl had been posing about me and calling me her gym crush for the last 2 months. My face is blurred out in all the videos, a lot of videos where her sitting in her car every morning and making up completely fictional romantic stories about our interactions. Each video had like 100 plus likes, which my wife says is not a lot but feels like a lot. She had posted some videos of us just passing each other and smiling, or our conversation where I was telling her to stop recording with voiceover about how I approached her in the gym and complimented her body. There was a video from that morning about her coming to me while I was packing up with her saying how I asked her out for a coffee. She is just making up fictional romantic for getting likes, and people were commenting and cheering for her. There were also other videos of her working out and posing in the gym locker room. My wife was laughing uncontrollably about how big of a sucker I am and how I am internet famous now. I told her this needs to stop, but my wife insisted that she is too invested in the drama now and wants to see what happens next. She said that this girl is really young and just trying to establish herself and get more followers, plus she has not done anything inappropriate and is not showing my face in the videos. My wife just wants me to play along and see what crazy Haley does next. So for the last 2 weeks, I've been going to the gym talking to her every day, and my wife keeps me updated on what story she came up with for the day. We go for a coffee every Wednesday, and I am mentoring her about nutrition and what she should focus on to the best of my abilities. It's all a game for my wife, and I do want Haley to succeed as long as she does not cross a line. However, the whole thing feels really crazy, and I am too old to deal with this. I am not sure how long I can keep up with the ACT. Her behavior seems innocent, but also I getting a bit uncomfortable with the whole thing now. Comments. Did the girl know Oop is married? Oop. Yes, she knows I am married. I wear my ring in the gym, and also I talk about my wife all the time to her. I also feel it's a bit weird for a 22-year-old person to make up stories. My wife feels she is just using me as an NPC in her fiction to gain more viewers and create drama. We discussed about it, and she told me about how some girls just make up stories about bad first dates as it gets them a lot of views. My wife feels it's weird, but I need to see the humor in this situation, at least it's entertaining, and she wants to know where her story goes next. Update July 2nd, 31st, 2024. Hey guys, I wrote a post 2 days ago regarding a Haley, a girl at my gym, asking me to spot her and me refusing to do it because she was recording me. The post blew up, and I wrote an update where I told my wife, and she found out that Haley was just making up fictional stories about me being her gym crush for likes. My wife loves her drama and asked me to continue as it is, as she found Haley's posts harmless and very amusing. Those posts blew up in the last week have been crazy. There were few people who did dramatic readings of my post last week, and millions of people saw it, one of them being my wife. I thought I was just venting here in anonymity about Hallie and my wife. On Saturday morning, my wife came to me and asked me if I posted my story. I asked her how she knows because she never used it. She showed me some person doing a dramatic reading of the story. She was just giddy and asked me if it was really me posting the story. I told her yes, and she just lost it. She was just laughing at how I was being so dramatic talking about a very funny situation. Moreover, most of the commenters were cheering my wife, and I have never seen my wife being so happy since our wedding. We had a bunch of my friends invited for barbecue party that evening, and my wife was also telling me about my post and showing them. Everyone was making fun of Haley's posts and teasing me. My friends even enacted what spotting a barbell squat looks like for their wives and what happens when the person squatting fails. I really started feeling bad for Haley as everyone was just making fun of her and her videos. I felt that we had taken things too far and she did not deserve this kind of ridicule. I told my wife that night that I'm going to tell Haley that we know about her videos the next time we meet, as I feel we are just being mean to her at this point. My wife again started grinning and showed me the comments. Apparently, a lot of people had already started snooping and found a bunch of Haley's posting about their gym crush, and my Haley was one of them. Haley had not responded to any of the comments but had promptly deleted all her recent videos. I was horrified as a lot of people were accusing her of being a home rare and to stay away from married men. I felt so embarrassed that I just felt like I wanted to bury my face and disappear. All I wanted was quick feedback on here and never meant for all this to happen. As days went on, more and more people viewed the video and Haley was still getting a lot of comments. My wife told me last night that almost 5 million people saw those videos. I really did not want to face Haley anymore and could not get myself to go to the gym for the last 2 days. Yesterday evening, Haley messaged me and asked me if I still plan to have coffee with her today, and my wife told me to just talk to her as she might also be feeling bad. My wife felt Haley was just doing childish things because she is a child and I should apologize to her for causing her all the stress. I went to the gym today, and to say that things were awkward between us at the start was an understatement. After my workout was done, Haley and I walked to a coffee shop nearby and had a chat. Before I could apologize to her, she started profusely apologizing to me for posting inappropriate posts about me. She said that she was just having fun and it was like a joke between all her friends. She told me that only her friends and family follow her, and she was just making up fun stories to entertain them. She didn't mean for it to blow up and for so many people to see them. She told me that she woke up this weekend and suddenly her had hundreds of views, likes, and messages. She was confused and checked, and everyone was commenting on her videos calling her a home raker and crazy Haley. She realized that I had posted a story because of some comments and immediately felt embarrassed because she learned that my wife and I knew about her posting stuff about me. She deleted all her recent videos, but people seem to be still finding her somehow and messaging her on her older posts. Also, her friend's message saw what was happening, and she had to explain to her mom that she was not dating a married man. I also apologized to her and told her I did not know that posts blow and was just worried I offended her when I did not spot her the other day. She was surprised that I did not know that, as it seems to be fairly common. I told her that my wife found her content funny, and so she asked me not to tell her. My wife felt she was talented and working so hard on her fitness to be an influencer. At the end, we just laughed about the situation. She told me that she always wanted to know how it would be to be internet famous and enjoyed her 15 minutes of fame. Seems that things are back to normal, and she has promised she will find another gym crush and we will continue being friends. Finally, I just wanted to ask everyone to not go and find Haley and let her be. Please, do not harass any Haley on the internet because of me. I am not going to disclose who the real one, so just stop harassing all Haley. They are not homerakers and just young kids. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.